Standing before a boardroom full of executives who value profit over people, a 32-year-old single father named Ethan Cole is about to confess to a death he spent 5 years hiding. The woman listening, Victoria Hale, the new CEO, is the sister of the man who died under his watch. He destroyed her family. Now she holds his entire future in her hands. But neither of them knows the truth yet. They're both guilty, and only together can they find redemption. If you want to see how guilt, grief, and impossible choices can transform two broken people into something stronger, stay with me until the end. And if this story moves you, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this journey travels. The fluorescent lights in Ethan Cole's office had been flickering for 3 days, but he hadn't bothered reporting it to maintenance. He liked the unreliable light. It matched how he felt most days, barely functional, struggling to stay on, threatening to go dark at any moment. At 32, Ethan looked older than his years. The lines around his eyes weren't from smiling. His brown hair had started showing gray at the temples 2 years ago, and he'd stopped caring enough to do anything about it. He kept himself clean, professional, forgettable. That was the goal. Be so unremarkable that people's eyes would slide right past him in meetings, in hallways, in life. It was 7:43 p.m. on a Thursday, and his daughter Lily was at his mother's house doing homework. He had maybe an hour before he needed to pick her up. Enough time to finish reviewing the Henderson Project timeline and send off the revised budget projections. His phone buzzed. A text from his mom. "She's asking when you're coming. Says she misses you." Ethan typed back quickly. 20 minutes. Tell her I miss her too. He did miss her. Lily was 7 years old and the only thing in his life that felt real. Everything else, this job, this office, the mechanical routine of his days, existed in a kind of fog. He showed up. He did the work. He went home. He made dinner. He helped with homework. He read bedtime stories. He fell asleep on the couch with his laptop open and budget spreadsheets glowing in the dark. And he tried very hard not to think about Daniel Hale. The name still landed like a fist to the stomach, even after 5 years. Ethan closed his eyes and pressed his palms against the desk. The wood was cool and solid. Real. He focused on that sensation until the tightness in his chest eased slightly. His office door was open. He always kept it open now, needing to see people passing by, needing proof that he wasn't alone. And through it he heard voices in the hallway. Someone laughed. Normal office sounds, safe sounds. Then he heard a name that made his blood stop. "Victoria Hale arrives Monday," someone was saying. A woman's voice, probably Janet from HR. "They're announcing it tomorrow morning, but it's basically done. She's the new CEO." Ethan's hands went numb. "Hale?" Another voice responded. "Male. Greg from accounting, maybe. As in Hale Industries, or..." Her family sold that company 3 years ago. She's been consulting since then. Apparently she's a miracle worker, turned around 2 dying companies in 18 months. "How old is she?" 30, I heard. Youngest CEO we've ever had." Their voices faded as they moved down the corridor, but Ethan couldn't move. He stared at his computer screen without seeing it. The words had turned to meaningless shapes. Victoria Hale, Daniel Hale's older sister. The thought that followed was immediate and visceral. She doesn't know. She can't know. There's no way she connects me to what happened. But his hands were shaking anyway. 5 years ago, Daniel Hale had been 25 years old, fresh out of graduate school, eager and brilliant, and so goddamn earnest it hurt to remember. He joined Ethan's engineering team during the Avalon project, a massive infrastructure bid that would make or break the company's entire fiscal year. The project had been understaffed from the beginning. Upper management had promised clients an impossible timeline, then dumped the consequences on Ethan's team. Ethan had been 27 then, newly promoted to senior project manager, desperate to prove himself. When executives told him to make it work, he made it work. He approved overtime. Then more overtime. 16-hour days became normal. Weekends disappeared. He told himself everyone was struggling together, that they'd get through it, that this was just how the industry operated. Daniel never complained, not once. He showed up early, stayed late, volunteered for extra shifts. "I've got it," he'd say with that eager smile. "I can handle it." Until he couldn't. The night it happened, Ethan had been home with Lily, who was 2 years old then and running a fever. His wife, ex-wife now, had been out of town. He'd been rocking Lily back to sleep when his phone rang at 11:47 p.m. Daniel had crashed his car on the drive home after a 16-hour shift, fell asleep at the wheel, hit a concrete barrier at 60 miles per hour, dead before the ambulance arrived. The investigation afterward had been brief and toothless. The company's legal team made sure of that. Accidental death, tragic, no one at fault. They sent flowers to the funeral. Ethan hadn't gone. He'd told himself it was because of Lily, because he couldn't leave her with a babysitter, because it wasn't appropriate for him to intrude on the family's grief. The truth was he'd been too much of a coward to face them. Now Daniel's sister was going to be his boss. Ethan's phone buzzed again. His mom. "She's getting antsy, you coming?" He grabbed his jacket and laptop bag with mechanical efficiency, shut down his computer, turned off the flickering light, walked through the empty office on autopilot. His car was in the parking garage, third level, far corner. He always parked in the same spot. Routine was safe. Routine didn't require thinking. The drive to his mother's house took 12 minutes. He spent all 12 trying to convince himself this was fine. Victoria Hale had probably never even heard his name. Why would she? He'd been middle management. The investigation had buried his involvement, and even if she somehow found out, it had been 5 years. People moved on. Except Ethan hadn't moved on. Not even close. His mother lived in a small ranch house in a neighborhood that had been nice 30 years ago and was now just tired. Lily burst out the front door before Ethan even got out of the car, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. "Daddy!" She crashed into him with the full force of a 7-year-old who believed her father could catch anything. He scooped her up, felt her skinny arms lock around his neck, and for a moment the tightness in his chest eased. "Hey, Ladybug, you finish your homework?" "Grandma helped me with the math. It was multiplication. I got them all right." "That's my girl." His mother appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Ellen Cole was 64, sharp-eyed, and had never once let Ethan get away with pretending he was fine when he wasn't. "You look tired," she said. "I'm always tired, Mom." "More tired than usual." "You eating?" "Yes." "Sleeping?" "Enough." She didn't believe him, but she didn't push. She'd learned years ago that Ethan shut down when pressed too hard. Instead, she just touched his shoulder briefly, her version of "I'm worried about you," and handed him Lily's lunchbox. "Thanks for watching her," Ethan said. "You don't have to thank me every time. She's my granddaughter." Bo. Lily was already in the car, buckling herself in and chattering about something that happened at recess. Ethan nodded along, making the appropriate sounds, but his mind was elsewhere. At home, a 2-bedroom apartment that was clean and functional and utterly devoid of personality, he made Lily mac and cheese for dinner while she worked on a drawing at the kitchen table. She was illustrating a story about a dragon who was afraid of heights, which she found hilarious. "Dragons are supposed to fly," she explained seriously, "but this one just walks everywhere. His name is Jeffrey. Jeffrey's a good name for a dragon." "I think so too." After dinner, bath time, teeth brushing, and 2 chapters of the book they were reading together. Something about a girl who discovered a magical library. Ethan tucked Lily into bed. She grabbed his hand before he could leave. "Daddy, are you sad?" The question caught him off guard. "What? No, Ladybug, I'm fine. You look sad sometimes, like tonight at Grandma's." He smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "I'm just tired from work. But I'm not sad. Not when I'm with you." That part, at least, was true. She seemed satisfied with that answer and released his hand. "Okay. Love you." "Love you too, Lily." He left her door cracked open. She didn't like complete darkness, and retreated to the living room. His laptop was still in his bag. He should review those budget projections. He should prep for tomorrow's staff meeting. He should do 100 things. Instead, he sat on the couch and stared at nothing. Victoria Hale was going to be announced as CEO tomorrow morning, which meant she'd be in the building next week, which meant there was a chance, slim but real, that she'd recognize his name from the accident report. He told himself it didn't matter. He told himself he'd survived the guilt this long, he could survive a little longer. He told himself that avoidance was a perfectly functional coping mechanism. But deep down, in this part of himself he tried very hard to ignore, Ethan knew the truth. He'd been waiting for this moment for 5 years. Waiting for the past to catch up. Waiting for someone to finally look him in the eye and say what he deserved to hear. "You killed him. And you knew you were killing him when you did it." Friday morning arrived with rain that hadn't been in the forecast. Ethan dropped Lily at school, drove to the office, and walked into a building that felt subtly different. There was an energy in the air, anticipation, anxiety, the electric charge that came before major change. The announcement was made at 9 a.m. in an all-hands meeting. Richard Voss, the outgoing CEO, stood at the front of the main conference room with the board members arranged behind him like a tableau. Ethan stood near the back, half hidden behind a group of engineers. "I'm pleased to announce," Voss said in his practiced executive voice, "that Victoria Hale will be joining us as CEO effective immediately. Many of you know her reputation. She's transformed struggling companies into industry leaders. We're lucky to have her." Polite applause. Ethan didn't clap. He was too busy trying to breathe normally. Then Victoria stepped forward, and Ethan's entire world tilted. She didn't look like Daniel. That was the first thought. Daniel had been tall and lanky, always moving, always smiling. Victoria was shorter, maybe 5'6", with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun and a face that gave away nothing. She wore a charcoal suit that looked expensive and simple, no jewelry except small silver earrings. Her eyes swept across the room with the kind of focused calm that suggested she missed very little. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was low and clear. "I'm looking forward to working with all of you. Over the next few weeks, I'll be meeting with department heads to understand how this company operates. I'm here to listen first and act second. If you have concerns, ideas, or feedback, my door will be open." More applause. Voss said something else, but Ethan didn't hear it. He was too busy cataloging Victoria's mannerisms, searching for any sign of recognition, any indication that she'd seen his name on a list somewhere. She gave no indication of anything, just stood there with that same calm expression, nodding occasionally, looking like someone who had done this a dozen times before and found it mildly boring. The meeting ended. People filtered out, talking in low voices. Ethan moved with the crowd, keeping his head down, aiming for the exit. "Ethan Cole?" He froze, turned slowly. Victoria was standing 10 feet away, flanked by 2 board members he vaguely recognized. She was looking directly at him. "Yes?" His voice came out steady. Small miracle. "You're the senior project manager for the engineering division, correct?" "Yes. I'd like to schedule a meeting with you next week. Tuesday afternoon work?" "Sure, yeah, Tuesday's fine." She nodded once, made a note on the tablet she was holding, and turned back to the board members. The conversation was over. Ethan made it back to his office before his hands started shaking. She'd known his name. She'd picked him out of a crowd. Was that normal? Did new CEOs memorize staff lists before they arrived? Or had she specifically looked him up? He spent the rest of the day in a fog of low-level panic, accomplishing nothing, starting at every sound in the hallway. By 5 p.m., he gave up pretending to work and went to pick up Lily early. The weekend passed in a blur of park visits and grocery shopping and helping Lily build an elaborate dragon castle out of cardboard boxes. Normal life. Safe life. Monday morning, he was back at his desk by 7 a.m., trying to prepare for the meeting with Victoria. He had no idea what she wanted to discuss. Engineering projects? Department efficiency? Budget allocation? Or maybe she just wanted to put a face to the name of the man who killed her brother. Tuesday afternoon arrived too quickly. At 2 p.m., Ethan walked to the executive floor, somewhere he rarely had reason to visit, and checked in with Victoria's assistant, a efficient-looking woman in her 40s who told him to wait. He sat in a chair near the window and watched the city sprawl below. From this high up, people looked like ants, cars like toys, everything distant and manageable. "Mr. Cole, she's ready for you." Okay. The office was large but not ostentatious. A desk, 2 chairs, a small conference table. The walls were mostly bare except for a single framed photo that Ethan didn't let himself look at too closely. Victoria was behind the desk, reading something on her computer. She glanced up when he entered. "Ethan, thanks for coming. Have a seat." He sat, tried to look relaxed, failed. She studied him for a moment with those dark, unreadable eyes. Then she said, "I've been reviewing project histories. The Avalon project came up several times as a major success. You were the lead manager on that, correct?" Of course. Of course she'd looked at that project specifically. "Yes," Ethan said. It was completed on time and under budget. Impressive, given the timeline constraints. I understand the team worked significant overtime. His throat was dry. The schedule was aggressive. We did what was necessary. How many people were on your team? 12 engineers, 3 support staff. Did you lose anyone during the project? Turnover, I mean. The question was casual, too casual. One, Ethan said carefully. An engineer named Daniel Hale. He died in a car accident during the final phase. Victoria's expression didn't change, not even a flicker. I remember reading about that. The accident report said he fell asleep driving home after a long shift. Yes. How long was the shift? Ethan's hands were clenched in his lap, nails digging into his palms. 16 hours. That's a long shift. It was a demanding project. She leaned back in her chair, still watching him with that unsettling calm. Did you approve his overtime that week? There it was. The question he'd been dreading for 5 years. I approved all the overtime, Ethan said. His voice sounded hollow. I was the project manager. It was my responsibility to make sure we met the deadline, even if it meant putting people at risk. The words hung in the air like smoke. Ethan forced himself to meet her eyes. I didn't think I was putting anyone at risk. I thought we were just working hard. Everyone was exhausted, but everyone kept saying they could handle it. I should have seen... His voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat. I should have seen that Daniel was past his limit. I should have sent him home earlier. I didn't. That's on me. Victoria was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Do you know who I am, Ethan? You're the new CEO. Before that. He could have lied, should have lied, but he was so goddamn tired of lying. You're Daniel Hale's sister. She nodded slowly. I am. I'm sorry, Ethan said, and those words felt pathetically inadequate. I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything, but Did you know I was his sister when you saw my name? Not immediately, but I figured it out. The last name? And you didn't say anything. In the meeting, just now. You were going to let me ask questions about my brother's death without telling me you knew who I was. Shame burned through him. Yes. Why? Because I'm a coward, Ethan said bluntly. Because I've spent 5 years trying to forget what I did, and you walking into this building meant I couldn't forget anymore. Because I didn't want to face you. Because, stop. Victoria held up a hand. She was quiet for a moment, her gaze fixed on something past his shoulder. Then she said, You want to know something? I already knew who you were before I took this job. Ethan's stomach dropped. What? I researched this company thoroughly before accepting the CEO position. I read the accident report multiple times. I know you were the project manager. I know you approved Daniel's overtime. I know the board cleared you of any wrongdoing. She paused. I also know you haven't led a major project since. You've kept your head down, taken smaller assignments, avoided anything high profile. Why? He couldn't breathe properly. Because I didn't deserve recognition. Because every success I had would have been built on Daniel's death. That's dramatic. That's the truth. Victoria stood and walked to the window, her back to him. Do you want to know what I remember about the night Daniel died? Ethan said nothing. She continued anyway. I remember getting a call from the hospital at midnight. I remember driving there so fast I'm surprised I didn't crash too. I remember the doctor telling me he was already gone, that there was nothing they could have done. I remember calling my parents. I remember my mother screaming. Her voice was steady, clinical. I also remember that 3 hours before Daniel got in that car, he called me. He was still at the office. He said he was exhausted, that he'd been working for 15 hours straight, that maybe he should just sleep at his desk and finish in the morning. And I told him to push through 1 more hour. I told him the project was almost done. I told him he could rest when it was finished. Oh, Ethan stared at her back. You didn't... I told him to keep working, Victoria said. My brother called me for permission to stop, and I told him to keep going. So when you say his death is on you, Ethan, understand that I've spent 5 years thinking the same thing. The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Victoria turned around. Her expression was still calm, but something in her eyes looked raw. I didn't come here for revenge. I came here because this company has the same culture that killed Daniel. Mandatory overtime, impossible deadlines, executives who treat burnout like a badge of honor. I've watched it destroy people at 3 different companies now. I'm here to change it. Ethan found his voice. Why are you telling me this? Because you're the only person in this building who understands what that culture costs. Everyone else sees Daniel as a footnote in an old project file. You see him as a person you failed. That makes you useful. Useful for what? Victoria's eyes sharpened. For helping me burn this whole system down. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over. Victoria's words kept circling through his mind. I told him to keep working. For 5 years, he'd carried the guilt of Daniel's death alone. The weight of it had shaped everything. His career, his relationships, the careful distance he kept from everyone except Lily. He'd believed he was the only one responsible, the only one who should suffer. But Victoria had been suffering too. And unlike Ethan, who'd retreated into obscurity, she'd turned her grief into something sharp and purposeful. She'd walked into companies and forced them to change. She'd made herself powerful enough that people had to listen. What had Ethan done? Hidden. Flinched away from every opportunity. Convinced himself he deserved to fade into nothing. At 6 a.m., he gave up on sleep and got up to make coffee. Lily wandered out of her room an hour later, rubbing her eyes, her hair sticking up in all directions. Why are you up so early? She mumbled. Couldn't sleep. Want pancakes? Chocolate chip? Of course. They ate breakfast together while Lily told him about a book she was reading at school. Something about a mouse who wanted to be a knight. Ethan listened with half his attention, the other half still churning through everything Victoria had said. Useful. She'd called him useful. As if the guilt that had been crushing him for years could somehow become a tool. He dropped Lily at school and drove to work on autopilot. His calendar showed a morning meeting with the engineering team, budget reviews in the afternoon. Nothing unusual. But when he got to his office, there was a message waiting on his desk. A single sheet of paper with Victoria's handwriting. My office. 11 a.m. He arrived 5 minutes early. Victoria's assistant waved him through without comment. This time, Victoria wasn't behind her desk. She was standing at the conference table with a laptop open and papers spread across the surface. When Ethan entered, she looked up briefly, then gestured to the empty chair across from her. Sit. Tell me about the last 5 years of this company's project management approach. That's a broad question. Be specific then. How many projects in your division required mandatory overtime in the past year? Ethan thought about it. All of them. Define mandatory. Implicit pressure. No one technically forces you to work weekends, but if you don't, you get reassigned to smaller projects or overlooked for promotions. The message is clear. How many people have quit because of it? I don't have exact numbers. Estimate. Maybe 15 from my division alone. Good people. Experienced engineers who just couldn't take the pace anymore. Victoria made a note on her laptop. And how many stayed but burned out? Showed up physically but stopped contributing meaningfully? More than I could count. She looked at him directly. Would you say this company's work culture is better or worse than it was 5 years ago? Ethan exhaled slowly. Worse. After Daniel died, there was a brief push for reform. People talked about wellness programs and work-life balance. Then the next big project came along, and it all got quietly dropped. Now we don't even pretend to care. Good. Good? It means the problem is obvious enough that fixing it will be noticeable. She closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair. I'm putting together a task force to overhaul workplace policies. Reasonable hours. Mandatory rest periods. Mental health resources. Real consequences for managers who ignore the new rules. I want you on it. Ethan stared at her. Why me? Because you understand the stakes. Because you won't let this turn into a PR stunt that accomplishes nothing. Because you owe Daniel something more than guilt. The last sentence hit like a punch. I'm not qualified, Ethan said. I'm just a project manager. You're someone who knows what happened when the system failed. That's the only qualification that matters. She paused. Unless you'd rather keep hiding in your office and approving overtime schedules you know are dangerous. Ethan flinched. That's not fair. Neither was Daniel working himself to death. Neither is every other employee in this building who's being pushed past their limits because management doesn't care. Fair doesn't exist here, Ethan. Only what we're willing to fight for. He wanted to argue, wanted to say this wasn't his responsibility, that he'd paid enough, that he just wanted to keep his head down and survive until Lily graduated high school. But Victoria was right. He'd spent 5 years hiding. Maybe it was time to stop. Okay, he said quietly. I'll do it. Something flickered in Victoria's eyes. Approval, maybe, or relief. The first meeting is Friday afternoon. I'll send you the details. Who else is on this task force? HR Legal, 2 other senior managers, and me. We're going to face resistance. A lot of resistance. The executive team thinks profit margins matter more than people. We're going to have to prove them wrong. How? Victoria's smile was sharp and humorless. By making it cost them more to keep the current system than to change it. Like, the task force meeting on Friday was exactly as difficult as Ethan expected. It took place in a windowless conference room on the 4th floor. Besides Ethan and Victoria, there was Margaret from HR, a woman in her 50s who'd been with the company for 20 years, and 2 other senior managers Ethan vaguely knew, David, who ran operations, and Lisa, who headed up sales. Victoria started the meeting by pulling up a presentation on the screen at the front of the room. The first slide was simple: burnout costs. Last year, Victoria said, this company lost approximately $4.2 million to turnover, absenteeism, and decreased productivity related to employee exhaustion. That's not a guess. I pulled the numbers from HR records and exit interviews. We're hemorrhaging talent because we work people until they break. Margaret shifted uncomfortably. With all due respect, turnover is normal in this industry. Normal isn't acceptable. Victoria clicked to the next slide, which showed a graph of turnover rates compared to industry averages. We're 30% above normal, and the people leaving aren't underperformers. They're our best engineers, the ones who actually care enough to burn out. David, the operations manager, leaned back in his chair with his arms crossed. So what's the solution? We can't just cut hours. We have deadlines, contracts, client expectations. Then we renegotiate contracts, Victoria said. Or we hire more people. Or we say no to projects we can't complete safely. Those are all options. The board will never approve. The board will approve what I tell them to approve. That's why they hired me. Oh, the room went quiet. Victoria's tone hadn't changed, still calm, still even, but there was steel underneath it. Ethan found himself speaking before he fully thought it through. What if we pilot the changes in one division first, test the new policies on a smaller scale before rolling them out company-wide? Victoria looked at him. Which division? Victoria. Engineering. My division. We're mid-sized. If we can prove the new approach works without destroying productivity, it'll be harder for people to argue against it. And if it does destroy productivity? David asked skeptically. Then we adjust, Ethan said. But I don't think it will. Half the inefficiency in our projects comes from people being too tired to work effectively. If we let people rest, they'll work better during the hours they're actually here. Lisa, the sales manager, frowned. What kind of policies are we talking about specifically? Victoria pulled up another slide. Mandatory rest periods after shifts over 10 hours. A cap on weekly hours. No one works more than 50 without explicit approval from both their direct manager and an HR representative. Mental health days that don't count against regular sick leave. And most importantly, consequences for managers who pressure employees to ignore these rules. Well, that last part's going to be the hard sell, Margaret said. A lot of managers won't like being monitored that closely. They don't have to like it, Victoria said. They just have to comply. The meeting continued for another hour, with everyone throwing out concerns and suggestions. By the end, they'd agreed to a pilot program in Ethan's division starting the following month. Victoria would handle the board. Margaret would draft the new HR policies. Ethan would work with his team to implement the changes. As people filed out, Victoria caught Ethan's arm. That was good, the pilot program idea. It just seemed logical. It was also brave. You didn't have to speak up. Ethan shrugged. I'm part of this now. Might as well actually participate. She studied him for a moment. You're different than I expected. Different how? I thought you'd fight me more. Defend yourself. Most people do when confronted with their mistakes. I spent 5 years defending myself, Ethan said quietly. It didn't make me feel any better. Something in Victoria's expression softened, just slightly. Then she nodded once and left. Ethan stood alone in the empty conference room, staring at the graphs still displayed on the screen. Numbers representing lives. People who'd quit or burned out or kept suffering in silence. He thought about Daniel, who'd trusted Ethan to keep him safe. He thought about Lily, who deserved a father who did more than just survive. And for the first time in 5 years, Ethan thought maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward that didn't involve drowning in guilt forever. Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan threw himself into the pilot program with an intensity that surprised him. He met with every engineer in his division individually, explaining the new policies and asking for feedback. Most were cautiously optimistic. A few were openly skeptical. You really think management will let this stick? One engineer asked. His name was Marcus, and he'd been with the company for 8 years. They've made promises before. This is different, Ethan said. Victoria has the authority to enforce it. And you trust her? Ethan thought about that. Yeah, I do. Marcus looked doubtful but didn't argue. The first real test came 3 days into the pilot program, when a major client requested an expedited timeline on a bridge design project. The kind of request that would normally mean weeks of mandatory overtime. Ethan's boss, a vice president named Warren, who'd been with the company for 15 years, called him into his office. The Sanderson project needs to move up, Warren said without preamble. Client wants preliminary designs in 3 weeks instead of 6. That's not realistic under the new guidelines. Then work around the guidelines. I can't. The whole point of the pilot program is to prove we can meet deadlines without destroying people. Warren's expression hardened. The whole point of this company is to win contracts. If we tell Sanderson we can't meet their timeline, they'll go to our competitors. Then maybe we should let them. If we can't do the work safely, we shouldn't take it. That's not your call to make, Cole. Actually, a voice said from the doorway, it is. Both men turned. Victoria stood there with her arms crossed, looking utterly unimpressed. This project falls under the pilot program, she continued, stepping into the office. Which means the decision goes through the task force, and the task force answer is no. We don't take on timelines that require our employees to sacrifice their health. Warren's face flushed. With all due respect, Ms. Hale, you don't understand how this industry works. Sometimes we have to push hard to win. I understand perfectly. I also understand that this company's approach has cost us millions in turnover and destroyed our reputation with top-tier talent. We're not doing that anymore. She looked at Ethan. Tell Sanderson we can deliver quality work in 5 weeks. If that's not acceptable, we walk. Warren looked like he wanted to argue further, but apparently thought better of it. Fine, but when we lose the contract, it's on you. I'll take that risk, Victoria said coolly. After Warren stalked out, Ethan turned to Victoria. Did you follow me here? Your assistant mentioned you'd been called in. I assumed it was about Sanderson. You didn't have to back me up. I could have handled it. I know. But letting Warren bully you would have undermined the entire program. She paused. Also, you were right. If we cave on the first pushback, none of this matters. They ended up not losing the Sanderson contract. The client agreed to the 5-week timeline after Victoria personally called to explain the company's new commitment to quality over speed. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. Word spread quickly. Within days, other divisions were asking about the pilot program. Some managers were openly hostile, but younger employees, especially the ones who'd been quietly suffering, started looking at Ethan and Victoria with something like hope. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Ethan started staying late at the office again, but this time it felt different. He wasn't hiding. He was building something. And every time he felt the old guilt creeping back in, the voice that said he didn't deserve this, that he was a fraud, He thought about Daniel, about how Daniel would have wanted this, would have fought for it himself if he'd lived. One evening, 3 weeks into the pilot program, Ethan was reviewing new HR guidelines when Victoria appeared in his office doorway. "Still here?" she asked. "Could say the same about you." Fair point." She stepped inside and sat in the chair across from his desk, the same chair where engineers usually sat during project reviews. "I wanted to say thank you for how hard you've been working on this." Besaman. Ethan felt uncomfortable with the praise. "It's not just me. Margaret's been handling most of the policy drafting. I'm not talking about the logistics. I'm talking about the fact that you show up to meetings with ideas. You push back when people try to water things down. You actually believe this can work. Don't you, Tool? I have to believe it. But belief doesn't come naturally to me anymore. I've spent too many years watching companies fail people." She paused. "You're different. You have hope, even after everything." Ethan wasn't sure how to respond to that. "I have a 7-year-old daughter. If I didn't have hope, I don't know how I'd keep going." Victoria's expression shifted, something softer crossing her face. "What's her name?" "Lily. You've mentioned her a few times in passing." She's the best thing in my life," Ethan said simply. "Has been since the day she was born." "What happened with her mother?" "If you don't mind me asking." "We divorced 2 years ago. Separate things. We got married too young, wanted different lives. She moved to Portland for work. Sees Lily during holidays and summer break. That must be hard, raising her alone." "It is, but it's also good. Forces me to stay present, to not disappear completely into my own head." He smiled slightly. "She's the reason I couldn't just quit after Daniel died. Someone needed me to show up every day, even when I didn't want to." Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I think Daniel would have liked you, if things had been different." The words hit Ethan harder than he expected. "You think so?" He was always drawn to people who were trying, who admitted when they struggled. He hated the corporate types who pretended everything was fine all the time. "I'm definitely not one of those." "No, you're not." She stood to leave, then hesitated. "Ethan, I'm glad you're here working on this. I couldn't do it alone." "Yes, you could," Ethan said honestly. "But I'm glad I can help anyway." After she left, Ethan sat in his office for a long time, staring at nothing. For the first time since Daniel's death, the guilt wasn't the only thing he felt. There was something else underneath it now, something fragile but real, purpose, and maybe, just maybe, the faint beginning of forgiveness. The pilot program lasted 6 weeks before the board demanded results. Ethan knew the meeting was coming. Victoria had warned him 3 days in advance, but that didn't make standing in front of 12 executives any less terrifying. The boardroom was all dark wood and leather chairs, windows overlooking the city like they were surveying their kingdom. These were people who measured success in profit margins and stock prices, not human lives. Victoria stood at the head of the table with her laptop connected to the projector. Ethan sat 3 chairs down, trying to look confident while his stomach churned. "Before we begin," Victoria said, her voice cutting through the low conversations, "I want to be clear about what we're discussing today. This isn't a debate about whether we should prioritize employee well-being. That decision has already been made. We're here to review the pilot program's effectiveness and determine next steps for company-wide implementation." Richard Voss, the former CEO who now chaired the board, raised an eyebrow. "That's a bold assumption, Ms. Hale." "It's the reality of modern business," Victoria replied without missing a beat. "Companies that burn through talent don't survive long term. We can adapt now, or we can watch our competitors figure it out first." She clicked to the first slide. Engineering division results after 6 weeks. Productivity increased by 18%. Project completion times remained consistent. Employee satisfaction scores doubled. Voluntary turnover dropped to 0. A woman named Patricia, CFO, before Voss retired, leaned forward. "How is productivity up if people are working fewer hours?" "Because exhausted people make mistakes," Ethan said. All eyes turned to him. His mouth was dry, but he pushed through. "Before the pilot program, we'd spend hours fixing errors that wouldn't have happened if people weren't working their 4th consecutive 12-hour day. Now we're catching problems early. Work is higher quality. There's less rework." And morale? Another board member asked. Ethan didn't know his name. Better than it's been in years, Ethan said. People actually want to come to work. They're engaged during meetings instead of just trying to stay awake. Patricia didn't look convinced. This is a 6-week sample size. What happens when a real crisis hits? When a client demands something urgent? Boss? We had 3 urgent requests during the pilot, Victoria said. We handled all of them by redistributing work across the team and being honest with clients about realistic timelines. We didn't lose a single contract. Yet, Patricia said, but you will. Clients don't care about our internal policies. They care about results. Then we'll find clients who value sustainability over exploitation, Victoria said flatly. The race to the bottom approach is exactly what cost this company Daniel Hale. And it's cost us dozens of talented employees since then. I'm not interested in perpetuating that system. The room went silent. Ethan saw several board members exchange glances. Daniel's name wasn't one that got mentioned often in these circles. Too uncomfortable, too much liability. Voss cleared his throat. Ms. Hale, we appreciate your passion, but board decisions require consensus, and I'm not hearing consensus. Then let me put it differently, Victoria said, and her tone shifted to something colder. Last quarter, this company paid out $800,000 in settlements to former employees who sued for workplace conditions. That number will keep climbing if we don't change. The pilot program isn't just morally right, it's financially prudent. We can implement it company-wide and cut those costs to nearly nothing, or we can keep paying lawyers to clean up our mistakes. Patricia's expression changed slightly. Numbers she understood. How much would company-wide implementation cost? She asked. Initially, about $1.2 million for additional hiring to cover reduced individual hours. But we'd recoup that within 8 months through decreased turnover and legal costs. After year 1, we'd actually be saving money. The board members talked among themselves in low voices. Ethan watched Victoria's face, looking for any sign of nervousness, but she stood there like a statue, completely calm, completely certain. Finally, Voss spoke. We'll approve a 3-month extension of the pilot program. After that, we'll revisit the data and make a final decision about company-wide implementation. But Ms. Hale, if productivity drops, if we lose contracts, this experiment ends immediately. Understood, Victoria said. It wasn't the full victory she wanted, but it was enough. For now. After the meeting ended and the board members filed out, Ethan found Victoria standing by the windows, staring down at the street below. You okay? He asked. That went better than expected. Really? Because it felt like pulling teeth. She turned to face him, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked tired. I've been in rooms like that a dozen times. Same arguments, same resistance. At least this board was willing to look at data. Some just shut you down the moment you mention employee welfare. Why do you keep doing it then? If it's this hard every time? Victoria was quiet for a moment. Because someone has to, and because I know what happens when no one does. They stood there together, 2 people bound by the same ghost, trying to build something that might finally put him to rest. The next morning, Ethan arrived at his office to find an email from Warren, his boss, marked urgent. The subject line read, "We need to talk." Ethan stared at it for a full minute before clicking. Cole, I've been instructed by the board to monitor the pilot program's impact on department efficiency. Going forward, all project timelines and resource allocations will require my explicit approval before implementation. This is non-negotiable. We'll meet weekly to review progress. First meeting is today at 3 p.m. Ethan read it twice, then forwarded it to Victoria without comment. Her response came back 60 seconds later. Ignore him. He has no authority over the pilot program. I'll handle it. But Warren clearly didn't get that message, because at 2:55 p.m. he appeared in Ethan's doorway. Ready for our meeting? Warren asked. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. Victoria said the pilot program doesn't require your approval. Victoria doesn't run this department, I do. Actually, Ethan said carefully, she's the CEO. She outranks you. Warren's smile vanished. Watch your tone, Cole. I've been with this company 15 years. I know how things work here. And what I know is that idealistic reforms don't survive contact with reality. This pilot program will fail. Maybe not this month, maybe not next month, but eventually. And when it does, I'll remember who wasted my time. He left before Ethan could respond. Ethan sat at his desk, hands clenched, trying to calm the anger rising in his chest. Warren represented everything wrong with this place. The entrenched mindset that people were disposable, that exhaustion was acceptable, that profit justified any cost. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Warren just tried to schedule a meeting with me to discuss oversight concerns. I told him to submit his concerns in writing. Want to bet I never get that email? Ethan texted back. He came to my office, said the program will fail. He's scared. Scared people lash out? Don't let him get in your head. Easier said than done. That evening, Ethan picked up Lily from his mother's house like usual. She was in the middle of an animated story about how her friend Sophia brought a pet turtle to school for show and tell, and it escaped during math class. And Mrs. Henderson was screaming, and everyone was looking under desks, and then Tyler found it in the bookshelf eating someone's eraser, Lily said, barely pausing for breath. It was the best day ever. Sounds eventful, Ethan said, trying to match her energy even though his mind was still churning through Warren's threats and the board meeting and the mounting pressure of trying to fix something that felt impossibly broken. At home, while Lily worked on spelling homework at the kitchen table, Ethan made spaghetti and tried to focus on the simple mechanics of cooking. Boil water, add pasta, heat sauce, normal things, safe things. Daddy, how do you spell although? Lily called out. Sound it out first. What do you think? A-L-L-T-H-O? Close. It's A-L-T-H-O-U-G-H. That's weird. Why is there a G and an H? English is weird sometimes. She accepted this wisdom and went back to her worksheet. Ethan drained the pasta and was reaching for plates when his phone rang. Victoria's name on the screen. Hold on, he told Lily. I need to take this. He stepped into the living room. Hey. Sorry to call during dinner, Victoria said. But we have a problem. Warren sent an email to the entire engineering division. He's telling people the pilot program is under review and that they should prepare for it to be discontinued. He can't do that. He just did. I'm drafting a response now, but the damage is done. People are already panicking. I've gotten 5 emails in the past 10 minutes from engineers asking if they need to start working overtime again. Ethan closed his eyes. What do you want me to do? Send a message to your team, tonight. Tell them the program isn't going anywhere. Tell them Warren was acting without authority. I'll handle him directly tomorrow. Okay, I'll do it now. Thank you. And Ethan, don't let this shake you. Warren's desperate. That means we're winning. After they hung up, Ethan stood in the living room for a moment, trying to organize his thoughts. Then he went back to the kitchen, served Lily her spaghetti, and sat down with his laptop while she ate. The email took 20 minutes to write. He kept it simple and direct. The pilot program was continuing as planned. Warren's email had been sent without approval. If anyone had concerns, they could come directly to Ethan. He hit send and closed the laptop. Work stuff? Lily asked through a mouthful of pasta. Yeah, work stuff. Is it bad work stuff or good work stuff? Ethan considered how to answer that. It's complicated work stuff, but I think it's going to be good, eventually. That's a very adult answer, Lily said seriously, and Ethan couldn't help laughing. You're right, it is. The next day, Warren was conspicuously absent from the office. According to the rumor mill, he'd been called into a meeting with Victoria and HR that lasted 3 hours. When he finally emerged, he looked furious but said nothing to anyone. Ethan didn't hear the full story until later that afternoon, when Victoria stopped by his office. Warren's been reassigned, she said without preamble, effective immediately. He'll be transitioning to a consulting role with limited authority. Ethan stared at her. You fired him. I moved him. There's a difference. But yes, he's no longer your direct supervisor. Who is? Me. Temporarily. Until we find someone who actually supports what we're building here. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. Victoria as his boss meant more access, more collaboration, but also more pressure. More chances to fail in front of the one person who understood exactly what failure had cost them both. You look terrified, Bar, Victoria observed. I'm not great with change, like. You've been handling non-stop change for 6 weeks. That's different. That was about fixing something broken. This is about... He stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence. About working directly with me, Victoria finished. And you're worried you'll mess it up. Something like that. She sat down in the chair across from his desk. The same chair she'd sat in weeks ago when this all started. Ethan, I wouldn't have reassigned Warren if I didn't think you could handle this. You're good at your job. Better than you give yourself credit for. The only thing holding you back is the belief that you don't deserve success. Maybe I don't. Maybe none of us do, Victoria said quietly. Maybe we're all just people trying to do better than we did yesterday. That's enough. Before Ethan could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Lily has a fever. Nothing serious, but thought you should know. I gave her medicine. He showed the message to Victoria. I should go get her. Of course. Go. We'll catch up tomorrow. Right? Yes, Rahman. Ethan grabbed his jacket and keys. On the way out, Victoria called after him. Ethan, you're doing good work. Don't forget that. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak, and left. Lily's fever broke by morning, but Ethan kept her home from school anyway. They spent the day on the couch watching nature documentaries and eating soup. Lily dozed off around noon with her head on his lap, and Ethan found himself staring at her sleeping face, thinking about responsibility. Being a parent meant showing up every day even when you were exhausted. It meant making decisions that terrified you because someone depended on you. It meant trying to be better than you were, not for yourself, but for the person who needed you most. Maybe that's what the pilot program was too. Showing up for people who needed someone to fight for them. Making the hard decisions because no one else would. Daniel hadn't had that. No one had shown up for him when he needed it most. Not Ethan. Not Victoria. Not the company that worked him until he broke. But maybe they could show up for everyone who came after. Lily stirred, opened her eyes, mumbled something about penguins, and fell back asleep. Ethan smoothed her hair back and made a silent promise to the brother of the woman he was starting to think of as a friend. I'll do better this time, I swear. 2 days later, the engineering division hit a crisis. A major telecommunications project, one of the company's biggest active contracts, ran into unexpected regulatory issues. The client needed a complete redesign of the infrastructure plan within 2 weeks, or they'd face massive penalties and potentially kill the deal. The old Ethan would have immediately calculated overtime schedules and started assigning weekend shifts. The new Ethan called an emergency meeting with his team instead. 12 engineers crowded into the conference room looking anxious. Marcus, the skeptical engineer from before, spoke first. We heard about the Telenet situation. How bad is it? It's tight, Ethan admitted, but not impossible. We need to redesign the Northern Corridor infrastructure and get approval from 3 regulatory bodies. 2 weeks is aggressive, but doable if we're smart about it. How many hours are we talking? Someone asked. No more than 50 per person per week, same as the pilot program guidelines. That's not enough time, Marcus said flatly. We'll need to work nights, weekends. No, Ethan said. We'll divide the work differently. Northern Corridor gets split into 3 sections. Each section gets a dedicated team. We run parallel workflows instead of sequential. It's more upfront coordination, but it means no single person carries the whole load. What about approval from regulatory bodies? Another engineer asked. That usually takes weeks on its own. I'll handle that, Victoria's voice came from the doorway. Everyone turned. She stepped into the room. I have contacts at 2 of the 3 agencies. I can expedite the review process. Not skip it, expedite it. We'll still meet all requirements, just on a faster timeline. Marcus crossed his arms. And if we still can't finish in 2 weeks? Then we'll be honest with the client, Victoria said. We'll tell them we need 3 weeks, but I don't think it'll come to that. This team is talented. You just need to be organized. She looked at Ethan. You can do this. It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact. Over the next 12 days, Ethan barely slept. Not because he was working impossible hours, he stuck to the 50-hour limit religiously, but because managing 3 parallel teams while coordinating with regulatory agencies and keeping the client updated required constant attention. But it worked. The engineers didn't burn out because they had clear endpoints. They worked hard during their shifts, then actually went home and rested. Productivity stayed high because people weren't making exhaustion-driven mistakes. And Victoria's contacts came through. 2 regulatory approvals came back in 5 days instead of 3 weeks. On day 13, they submitted the final redesign to the client. On day 14, the client approved it. The Telenet project was saved. That evening, Victoria called an impromptu celebration in the engineering department. Someone brought champagne, someone else ordered pizza. The engineers were laughing and clapping each other on the back, riding the high of pulling off something that should have been impossible. Ethan stood near the back of the room, watching. Marcus approached with a beer in hand. "I was wrong," Marcus said simply. "About the pilot program. I didn't think it could work under pressure, but you proved it." "We proved it," Ethan corrected. "The whole team." "Yeah, but you let it. You could have caved, could have told us to work weekends. You didn't." Marcus took a drink. "I've been here 8 years. This is the first time I've felt like management actually gave a damn whether we lived or died." He walked away before Ethan could respond. But the words stayed with Ethan, settling into his chest like warmth. Victoria appeared beside him, holding 2 plastic cups of champagne. She handed him one. "To victories," she said. "Small ones," Ethan agreed. They stood there together, watching the engineers celebrate. Then Victoria said quietly, "Daniel would have loved this. Seeing people succeed without destroying themselves." "You think so?" "I know so. He used to talk about it all the time. How the industry was broken, how someone needed to fix it." She paused. "I think he'd be proud of what we're doing." Ethan's throat tightened. "I hope you're right." "Yeah, I am. And I think you need to start believing that you deserve to be proud too." Before Ethan could figure out how to answer that, his phone rang. His mother's number. "I need to take this," he said, and stepped into the hallway. "Mom, everything okay?" "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Lily just wanted to say goodnight before bed. Hold on." There was shuffling, then Lily's voice. "Daddy! Grandma let me make cookies and I only burned them a little bit." Ethan smiled despite everything. "Only a little bit? That's impressive." "She says I'm a natural chef, but I think she's lying to be nice." "Your grandma doesn't lie. If she says you're a natural chef, you're a natural chef." "Are you coming home soon?" "Yeah, Ladybug, soon. I just need to finish up here." "Okay, love you." "Love you too, Marshall." After he hung up, Ethan stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the celebration continuing behind the closed door. 2 months ago, he'd been a man convinced he deserved nothing but punishment. Now he was leading a team, building something meaningful, and actually believing, for the first time in years, that redemption might be possible. It was terrifying. But it was also the first thing that had felt real since Daniel died. The success of the Telenet project changed something fundamental in the company. Other divisions started asking questions. How did engineering pull it off? What were they doing differently? Could those methods work elsewhere? Victoria capitalized on the momentum immediately. Within a week, she'd arranged presentations for 3 other department heads. Ethan found himself standing in front of rooms full of skeptical managers, walking through the pilot program results, answering the same concerns over and over. What if my team can't handle the work in fewer hours? What if clients won't accept slower timelines? What if this is just a fluke? Ethan answered honestly every time. It wasn't easy. It required planning. It required saying no to some projects. But it was possible. And more importantly, it was necessary. Not everyone was convinced. A senior operations manager named Gerald cornered Ethan after one presentation. "This idealistic nonsense might work for engineering," Gerald said, "but operations runs on tight margins. We can't afford to coddle people." "I'm not asking you to coddle anyone," Ethan replied. "I'm asking you to treat them like human beings instead of machines." "Same difference." Ethan felt anger spike through him. Daniel Hale was 25 years old when he died. He had a family. He had a future. And he died because people like you decided margins mattered more than his life. So no, Gerald, it's not the same difference. And if you can't see that, you're exactly the kind of manager this company doesn't need anymore. Gerald's face went red. He opened his mouth to respond, but Victoria appeared beside them. "Problem?" she asked mildly. "No problem," Gerald muttered. "We're done here." He left. Victoria watched him go, then turned to Ethan. "That was harsh." "Too harsh?" "No, exactly harsh enough." She smiled slightly. "I'm glad you're finally getting angry. I've been angry for 5 years." "No, You've been guilty for 5 years. Anger is different. Anger is useful. But that night, alone in his apartment after putting Lily to bed, Ethan thought about Victoria's words. She was right. Guilt had paralyzed him, made him small, made him hide. But anger? Anger pushed him forward, made him fight, made him refuse to accept that Daniel's death had been meaningless. Maybe that's what redemption actually looked like. Not forgiveness, not absolution, but the refusal to let tragedy be the end of the story. He opened his laptop and started drafting an email to Victoria. Ideas for expanding the pilot program, ways to address the most common objections, strategies for dealing with resistant managers like Gerald. The words came easier than they had in years. By the time he finished, it was past midnight. He hit send and closed the laptop. Then, for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan fell asleep without nightmares. The board meeting to approve company-wide implementation was scheduled for 6 weeks after the Telenet victory. Victoria spent those weeks building an ironclad case. She compiled data from 4 divisions now running modified pilot programs. She brought in external consultants who confirmed that the new approach aligned with industry best practices. She even got testimonials from 3 major clients praising the improved quality of work. Ethan helped where he could, but mostly he focused on keeping his own division running smoothly. Proof of concept was more powerful than any presentation. The night before the board meeting, Victoria called him. "I need to ask you something," she said, "and you can say no." "Okay." "I want you at the meeting tomorrow, not just in the room. I want you to speak, to tell them directly what the old system cost, what the new system makes possible." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Victoria, I'm not good at that kind of thing. You were good at the manager presentations." "That was different. Those were small groups. This is the board. This is 12 people who need to hear the truth from someone who lived it. I can show them all the data in the world, but data doesn't make people feel anything." "You can." "What if I mess it up?" "Then we'll deal with it, but I don't think you will." She paused. "I wouldn't ask if I didn't believe you could do this." Ethan closed his eyes. Every instinct told him to say no, to hide, to let Victoria handle it alone like she'd handled everything else. But hiding hadn't saved Daniel, and it wouldn't save anyone else. "Okay," he said, "I'll do it." The boardroom felt different when Ethan walked in the next morning. Maybe because this time he wasn't just an observer. This time he had something to say. Victoria was already there, setting up her presentation. She looked up when he entered and gave him a small nod. No pressure, no expectations, just quiet confidence that he belonged here. The board members filed in over the next 10 minutes. Voss, Patricia, 8 others whose names Ethan had finally learned. They took their seats with the casual authority of people who'd been making decisions in rooms like this for decades. Victoria started with the data. 6 divisions now operating under new guidelines. Productivity up across the board. Turnover down by 40%. Client satisfaction scores at a 5-year high. Employee engagement doubled. Patricia interrupted. "These are impressive numbers, Ms. Hale, but I'm still concerned about scalability. What works for a few hundred employees might not work for thousands." "That's a fair concern," Victoria said, "which is why I'd like Ethan Cole to address it. He's been managing one of our largest divisions under the new system." "Ethan?" Every eye in the room turned to him. Ethan stood, and his hands were shaking, but his voice came out steady. "6 months ago," he said, "I approved a 16-hour shift that killed a man named Daniel Hale. He was 25. He'd been working for this company for 8 months. He was talented and dedicated, and he trusted me to keep him safe. And I failed him." The room was silent. Patricia looked uncomfortable. Voss's expression was unreadable. Ethan continued, "For 5 years after that, I told myself it was an accident, that I couldn't have known, that the system was broken and I was just one person caught in it, and all of that was true. But it was also true that I made a choice. I chose to prioritize deadlines over Daniel's life, and he died because of it." "Barbos Mas," he took a breath. "The pilot program isn't about being nice to employees. It's about refusing to make that choice ever again. It's about building a system where managers don't have to choose between their people and their jobs, where exhaustion isn't treated as dedication, where a 25-year-old engineer doesn't die driving home because we worked him until he couldn't stay awake." Patricia started to speak, but Ethan wasn't finished. Patricia started to, "You're worried about scalability, about whether this works for thousands of employees. Here's what I know. Every single person in this company is someone's son or daughter, someone's parent or sibling or friend. And every time we push them past their breaking point, we're gambling with their lives. The old system made that gamble routine. The new system refuses to gamble at all. So yes, it's scalable, because the alternative is continuing to destroy people, and I won't be part of that anymore. None of us should be." He sat down. His heart was pounding so hard he thought everyone could hear it. The silence stretched for what felt like an hour. Then Voss cleared his throat. "That was quite a statement, Mr. Cole. It's the truth." "I know." Voss looked around the table. "I think we've heard enough. Let's vote." The vote was 9-3 in favor of company-wide implementation. When it was over and the board members began filing out, Patricia stopped beside Ethan's chair. "I voted yes," she said quietly. "For what it's worth, you were right. We've been gambling with people's lives. It's time to stop." After everyone left, Ethan and Victoria stood alone in the empty boardroom. "You did it," Victoria said. "We did it." "No, you did it. That speech." She stopped, and for the first time since he'd met her, Victoria looked like she might cry. "Daniel would have been so proud of you." Ethan's throat tightened. "I just told the truth. The truth is hard. You told it anyway. That takes courage." They stood there together, two people who'd spent 5 years drowning in guilt, finally seeing the surface above them. It wasn't forgiveness? Not yet. But it was close. The company-wide implementation should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like walking into a war zone. Within 48 hours of the board's approval, the pushback started. Not from employees, they were cautiously hopeful, even excited, but from middle management. The people who'd built careers on pushing teams past breaking points, who measured their worth by how much they could extract from the people beneath them. Gerald from operations sent a company-wide email 3 days after the vote, carefully worded to sound reasonable while undermining everything. He talked about maintaining competitive edge and not losing sight of excellence, and ensuring we don't sacrifice ambition for comfort. The subtext was clear. The new policies would make them weak. Ethan was reading the email for the third time, trying to decide how to respond, when Victoria appeared in his doorway. "Don't," she said. "Don't what?" "Don't respond to Gerald's email. That's what he wants. A public argument he can use to position himself as the voice of reason. So we just let him poison the well? No, we prove him wrong." Victoria stepped into the office and closed the door behind her. "Implementation starts Monday across all divisions. That gives us 4 days to make sure it doesn't fall apart immediately. We need managers on board, the ones who are scared but not hostile. If we can get them to see this works, Gerald becomes irrelevant. And if we can't, then we'll have a different problem, but one crisis at a time." She looked tired. Ethan realized he hadn't actually seen her leave the building before 9 p.m. in weeks. "When's the last time you went home at a reasonable hour?" Victoria blinked at the question. "Why?" "Because you're implementing workplace reform while working yourself into the ground. The irony is pretty thick." "I'm fine." That's what Daniel probably said, right up until he wasn't. Look. The words came out harsher than Ethan intended, but Victoria didn't flinch. She just looked at him for a long moment, then laughed. It was a rough sound, like she'd forgotten how. "Point taken?" She said. "I'll leave by 7 tonight. Happy?" Thrilled. After she left, Ethan sat staring at Gerald's email. Victoria was right. Responding publicly would only create drama. But maybe there was another way to handle it. He pulled up his contact list and started making calls. Manager to manager. Personal conversations instead of public statements. By the end of the day, he'd talked to 8 people across 4 divisions. Most were anxious about the changes, but willing to try. A few were openly resistant. One, a woman named Sarah, who ran the marketing department, was enthusiastic. "Finally," Sarah said over the phone. "I've been losing people to burnout for 2 years. If this actually works, it'll save my entire team." "It works," Ethan told her, "but it's not magic. You have to actually enforce the limits. The moment you let someone work a 60-hour week because it's easier, the whole thing collapses." "Got it. No exceptions." "Well, rare exceptions. but they need to be actual emergencies, not just inconvenient deadlines. I can do that, okay? 4 days. After he hung up, Ethan felt slightly better. Gerald could send all the emails he wanted. If enough managers made this work, the results would speak louder than any manifesto. That weekend, Ethan took Lily to the park. It was one of those clear autumn days where the air smelled like wood smoke and dying leaves, and the light turned everything gold. Lily was on the swings, pumping her legs and shrieking with joy every time she went high enough to see over the trees. Ethan sat on a bench nearby, half watching her, half thinking about the week ahead. Implementation, training sessions, inevitable resistance, the constant low-grade anxiety that he was going to mess this up and let down everyone counting on him. "You're doing that thing again," a voice said. Ethan looked up. Victoria was standing a few feet away, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual suit. She looked different, younger, almost uncertain. "What thing?" Ethan asked. "The thing where you look like you're trying to solve 1,000 problems at once. What are you doing here?" "I live 2 blocks away. I come here sometimes." She gestured toward the bench. "Mind if I sit?" "It's a public bench." She sat anyway, leaving careful space between them. For a moment, they just watched Lily swing, her laughter cutting through the afternoon quiet. "Is that your daughter?" Victoria asked. "Yeah, Lily. She looks happy, say it." "She's 7. Happiness is her default setting." Victoria smiled slightly. "Must be nice." They sat in silence for a while. Then Victoria said, "I'm scared we're going to fail." Ethan turned to look at her. "You don't seem scared." "I'm excellent at pretending. But yeah, I'm terrified. This is the biggest implementation I've ever attempted. If it doesn't work, we'll have proved every skeptic right. The company will backslide, people will suffer, and it'll be my fault." "Our fault," Ethan corrected. "I'm in this too." "I know, that helps. Having someone who understands what we're actually trying to do." She paused. "I don't have a lot of people like that." Before Ethan could respond, Lily came running over, breathless and flushed. "Daddy, I want to go on the slide now. Will you come?" "Of course, Ladybug." He stood, then glanced at Victoria. "You want to join us?" Victoria looked surprised by the invitation. Then she nodded. "Sure." They spent the next hour at the playground. Lily appointed herself tour guide, showing Victoria every piece of equipment and explaining its proper use with the seriousness of a professor. Victoria played along, asking questions and nodding gravely when Lily demonstrated the correct technique for the monkey bars. Ethan watched them together and felt something shift in his chest. For 5 years, Victoria had been a ghost. Daniel's sister, a name attached to guilt. But watching her laugh at Lily's commentary on why the blue slide was superior to the red slide, she was just a person. Someone who was tired and scared and trying her best to fix something broken. Someone who maybe needed a friend as much as he did. When they finally left the park, Lily was chattering about how Miss Victoria was really nice, even though she doesn't know that you have to go down the red slide backwards for maximum fun. "I'll make sure to note that for next time," Victoria said seriously. "There's going to be a next time?" Lily asked, eyes wide. Victoria glanced at Ethan, uncertain. He nodded slightly. "If your dad doesn't mind," Victoria said. "Can she come for dinner?" Lily asked immediately. "We're having tacos. Daddy makes really good tacos." "Lily, Victoria probably has plans." "I don't," Victoria said, "and I love tacos." That's how Ethan ended up making dinner for 3 in his small apartment kitchen while Lily showed Victoria her collection of dragon drawings. Victoria asked questions about each one. Why this dragon had purple scales, whether that one could breathe ice instead of fire. And Lily answered with the patient authority of an expert. Over dinner, Lily dominated the conversation, talking about school and her friend Sophia and the turtle incident. Victoria listened like it was the most fascinating thing she'd ever heard. After Lily went to bed, Ethan and Victoria sat in the living room with coffee. The apartment was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic outside. "Thank you," Victoria said, "for inviting me. I can't remember the last time I just existed without thinking about work." "You needed a break." "We both did." She took a sip of coffee. "Lily's great. You've done a good job with her." "I try. Half the time I'm convinced I'm screwing it up." "That's called being a parent, I think." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Victoria said, Daniel wanted kids someday. He used to talk about it, how he'd be the fun dad who built ridiculous pillow forts and taught them to code video games. He would have been good at it. Yeah. Her voice was soft. He would have. Ethan wanted to say something comforting, something that would ease the sadness in her voice, but he knew from experience that some pain didn't ease. It just became part of you. I'm glad you're here, he said instead. Working on this. I couldn't do it alone. You could, but I'm glad you don't have to. She left around 10 and Ethan stood at the window watching her walk to her car. She looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable than the unshakable CEO who faced down hostile board members. He thought about how much courage it must have taken for her to show up at the park, to accept the dinner invitation, to let herself be human instead of perfect. They were both learning how to do that, how to be people again instead of just walking collections of guilt and grief. Maybe that's what healing looked like. Not dramatic transformation, just small moments of being okay, of letting someone else in. Monday morning arrived with the kind of nervous energy that came before major change. The new policies were officially active across all divisions. 50-hour work week caps, mandatory rest periods, real enforcement mechanisms. Ethan's inbox was flooded by 8 a.m. Questions from managers, concerns from team leads, a few angry messages from people who thought the whole thing was bureaucratic nonsense. He spent the morning putting out fires. By noon, he'd answered 40 emails and taken a dozen phone calls. His coffee had gone cold 3 times. At 12:30, Victoria called an emergency meeting of department heads. 15 people crowded into the conference room, most looking exhausted already. I know today has been chaotic, Victoria said without preamble. That's normal. Change is messy. But I need to know what you're seeing in your divisions. Real problems, not hypothetical concerns. Sarah from marketing spoke first. My team is confused about how to log hours. The system isn't clear. We'll fix that today, Victoria said, making a note. What else? But Gerald leaned back in his chair. My operations team is already behind on 3 projects because we can't work the hours necessary to meet deadlines. Are the deadlines realistic? Ethan asked. They were realistic under the old system. That's not an answer. Well, Gerald's jaw tightened. We have contracts. We have commitments. We can't just ignore them because the CEO decided we need to coddle people. Gerald, Victoria's voice went cold. You can either adapt your approach or find another company. Those are your options. Which one are you choosing? The room went silent. Gerald stared at her, clearly weighing whether to push back. Finally, he looked away. I'll adapt. Good. Anyone else? The meeting continued for another hour. Most of the problems were logistical, systems that needed updating, policies that needed clarification, fixable things. But underneath it all, Ethan could feel the resistance. The managers who were complying because they had to, not because they believed. After everyone filed out, Victoria slumped in her chair. Gerald's going to be a problem, she said. He's been a problem since the beginning, Betts. Yes, but now he's a problem with authority over 200 people. If he sabotages this, then we'll deal with it. But we can't fire everyone who disagrees with us. I know. Doesn't mean I have to like it. Ethan understood the frustration. They'd won the policy battle, but winning hearts and minds was a different fight. Slower, messier. No clean victory. Over the next 2 weeks, the reality of implementation set in. Some divisions adapted smoothly. Sarah's marketing team thrived under the new structure. The engineering division continued performing well. Other areas struggled. Operations missed 2 deadlines. The sales department lost a major contract because they couldn't provide 24/7 support anymore. Gerald made sure everyone knew about both failures. The executive team started grumbling. Board members sent concerned emails. Even Patricia, who'd voted for implementation, was asking questions about contingency plans. Ethan found Victoria in her office late one Thursday night, staring at her computer screen with the kind of blank expression that meant she'd been staring for hours. You're still here, he said from the doorway. So are you. I'm leaving now. You should too. I need to finish this report for the board. They want an update on implementation challenges. Victoria, it's 11 p.m. The report can wait until tomorrow. The board meeting is tomorrow. Then it can wait until morning. You're not thinking clearly anymore. I can see it from here. Pussy? She finally looked at him, and her eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion. What if this doesn't work? Ethan, what if we're wrong? Barshnki. We're not wrong. The data proves it. Data from divisions that are succeeding. What about the ones that aren't? What about the contracts we're losing? What if the cost is too high? Ethan walked into the office and sat in the chair across from her desk. You know what the cost of the old system was. You buried your brother because of it. That's too high. This? He gestured at her computer. This is Growing Pains. It's messy and frustrating, but it's not killing anyone. That's the difference. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she closed her laptop. You're right. I'm too tired to think. I should go home. Good. I'll walk you to your car. You don't have to... I know. They walked through the empty building together. Their footsteps echoed in the deserted hallways. Outside, the parking garage was dark and cold. At her car, Victoria turned to face him. Thank you for pulling me out of there. I would have stayed all night. I know. That's why I came looking for you. Usman, she smiled slightly. We're a mess, aren't we? Two workaholics trying to reform workplace culture. The irony isn't lost on me. We should probably work on that. Probably. Neither of them moved. Then Victoria said, Would you want to have dinner again? With Lily and you? Not work dinner, just dinner. Ethan felt something warm unfold in his chest. Yeah, we'd like that. Good. Because Lily promised to show me her dragon castle, and I've been thinking about it all week. After she drove away, Ethan stood in the parking garage for a moment, trying to understand what was happening. Somewhere along the way, Victoria had stopped being Daniel's sister and started being someone important to him. Someone he looked forward to seeing, someone whose opinion mattered. It should have felt like betrayal, finding friendship in the person he'd wronged. But it didn't. It felt like the first honest thing he'd done in years. The board meeting the next day was brutal. Victoria presented the implementation report with her usual calm competence, but the numbers weren't great. 2 failed deadlines, 1 lost contract, productivity down in 3 divisions. Ms. Hale, Voss said carefully, we gave you 3 months to prove this works. We're 6 weeks in, and the results are mixed at best. Growing pains, Victoria said. Every major change has them. At what point do growing pains become permanent damage? Patricia asked. She didn't sound hostile, just concerned. We're losing money. We're losing contracts. Our competitors are circling. We're also retaining talent at unprecedented rates, Victoria countered. Employee satisfaction is up. Quality of work is improving. The divisions that have fully adapted are outperforming their previous benchmarks. And the ones that haven't adapted, Voss pressed, are being managed by people who don't want this to work. Gerald's operations division accounts for 60% of our current problems. If we address that issue, most of these concerns resolve themselves. You want to fire Gerald? One of the board members asked. After we just reassigned Warren? How many managers are we supposed to go through? As many as it takes, Victoria said flatly. I'm not going to let resistant managers sabotage workplace reform. If they can't adapt, they need to go. The board members exchanged glances. Ethan could see them calculating, weighing costs and benefits, wondering if Victoria was worth the chaos she was creating. Finally, Voss spoke. We'll give you 8 more weeks. But Ms. Hale, if the numbers don't improve significantly by then, we'll need to reevaluate this entire program, including your position. It was a threat wrapped in professional language, but the meaning was clear. Fix this or you're done. Victoria's expression didn't change. Understood. After the meeting, Ethan followed her back to her office. She walked fast, her shoulders tight with suppressed tension. Inside, she closed the door and leaned against it. They're going to fire me, she said. Not if the numbers improve. How? How do we fix operations in 8 weeks when Gerald's actively working against us? We document everything, every missed deadline, every time he pressures someone to work over the limit, every policy violation. Then we take it to HR and the board with proof that he's the problem. They can't ignore documentation. Victoria looked at him. That's going to take time, and we don't have much. Then we move fast. I'll reach out to people in operations, get them to report violations confidentially, build a case. Gerald will know what we're doing. Barshim.
Let him. Either he'll clean up his act, which solves the problem, or he'll get worse and give us more evidence. Either way, we win. Victoria pushed off from the door and started pacing.
This is riskier than the pilot program. If it blows up in our faces, it won't. You can't know that. No, but I know Gerald's been getting away with this for years because no one bothered to hold him accountable. That ends now.
She stopped pacing and looked at him. Really looked at him. You've changed since this started. You're not the same person I confronted 6 months ago. Neither are you. I haven't changed.
I've always been this way. No, Ethan said. You've always been determined, but 6 months ago you were alone. You didn't trust anyone to help you. Now you do. Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it. After a moment, she said quietly, Maybe you're right. That weekend, Victoria came for dinner again. This time she brought ingredients to make homemade pizza. Lily was thrilled with the idea and insisted on helping with everything, which meant the kitchen ended up covered in flour and sauce ended up in places sauce should never be. But the pizza turned out surprisingly good, and Lily declared Victoria an official chef now, just like me, which Victoria accepted with appropriate solemnity. After dinner, they built the promised dragon castle using every cardboard box Ethan had saved from deliveries. It took up half the living room and was structurally unsound, but Lily loved it. This is where the Dragon King lives, she explained, pointing to the tallest tower. And this is where Jeffrey lives because he's afraid of heights, so he gets the ground floor. Very considerate, Victoria said seriously. Later, after Lily went to bed, Ethan and Victoria sat on the couch, surrounded by cardboard castle walls. I needed this, Victoria said, more than I realized. Cardboard architecture? Normalcy. Being around people who don't want anything from me except to build ridiculous castles. Lily's pretty great at making people feel normal. She gets that from you. Ethan shook his head. I'm not normal. I'm just trying. That's what normal is, I think. Trying, showing up, being present even when it's hard. She paused. You're good at that. Took me a long time to figure out how. They sat in comfortable silence. Then Victoria said, Can I tell you something? Of course. When I took this job, I told myself it was about reforming the company, fixing the culture that killed Daniel. But part of me, a part I didn't want to admit, came here because of you. Ethan's stomach tightened. What do you mean? I blamed you. For 5 years I blamed you. I knew the system was broken, but you were the face of it, the person who'd approve those hours. I think I wanted to confront you, to make you feel what I felt. She looked at him. But you already felt it. You'd been drowning in guilt just like me. And instead of someone to blame, I found someone who understood. Someone who was trying just as hard as I was to make sure Daniel's death meant something. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. I don't know if it means something yet. It does. We're changing things, saving people who would have burned out. That's meaning. That's purpose. That's more than most people get. Is it enough? I don't know, but it's something. They talked until midnight about Daniel, about the company, about what came next, not as CEO and project manager, not as architect and executor of workplace reform, just as two people trying to make sense of loss. When Victoria finally left, Ethan stood at the door watching her drive away. He thought about how strange life was, how the worst thing that ever happened to him had somehow led to this, a friendship he hadn't expected, a purpose he hadn't sought, and the slow, painful process of learning to be okay again. It wasn't forgiveness yet, not entirely, but it was close enough to feel like hope. Monday morning, Ethan started building the case against Gerald. He reached out to 3 operations managers he'd talked to during implementation, people who seemed frustrated with Gerald's approach. 2 were willing to talk confidentially. 1 gave him specific examples of Gerald pressuring teams to ignore hour limits. By Wednesday, Ethan had documented 6 policy violations. By Friday, he had 12. He took the documentation to Victoria that afternoon. She reviewed it carefully, her expression hardening with each page. This is more than enough, she said finally. We can take this to HR tomorrow.
Are you sure? Gerald's been here 15 years. He has allies. He also has a pattern of violations that puts the company at legal risk. The board can't ignore that. Arse. They scheduled a meeting with HR for Monday morning, but word leaked somehow, maybe through one of the managers Ethan had talked to, maybe through someone in HR itself. And by Sunday night, Gerald knew he was being investigated. Ethan got the email at 10 p.m. It was sent to him, Victoria, and the entire operations division. The message was simple. I refuse to be scapegoated for implementing realistic standards while others push unrealistic idealism. If this company wants to fail, that's their choice. I won't be part of it. Effective immediately, I resign. Ethan read it 3 times, then called Victoria. Did you see Gerald's email? He asked when she picked up. Yes, just now. Is this good or bad? Well, both. We don't have to fight to fire him, which is good. But his resignation email is going to rally everyone who's been resisting the new policies. He's positioning himself as a martyr. What do we do? Victoria was quiet for a moment. We let him go. We promote someone from within operations who actually supports reform. And we prove that the division runs better without him. That's a gamble. Everything we've done has been a gamble, at least this one we saw coming. Yes. They stayed on the phone for another 20 minutes, working through logistics and strategy. By the time they hung up, Ethan felt exhausted but oddly relieved. Gerald was gone. One less obstacle. But he couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest part was still ahead. Gerald's resignation created a vacuum that the company didn't know how to fill. The operations division descended into chaos almost immediately. 3 senior managers quit within 48 hours, citing Gerald's reasons almost word for word. Projects that were already struggling fell further behind. 2 major clients called to express concerns about delays. The board scheduled an emergency meeting for Wednesday morning. Ethan spent Tuesday night lying awake, staring at the ceiling and running through worst-case scenarios. The board would panic. They'd blame Victoria. They'd roll back the reforms and everything they'd fought for would disappear like it had never existed. At 3 a.m., he gave up on sleep and went to make coffee. He was sitting at this kitchen table when his phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. You awake? He called her instead of texting back. Can't sleep either? He asked when she picked up. Every time I close my eyes, I see tomorrow's meeting. Voss telling me I'm fired. The board voting to reverse everything. Gerald winning. That won't happen. You don't know that? No, but I know you're not going down without a fight, and neither am I. Victoria laughed, but it sounded tired. We're quite a pair. 2 insomniacs trying to save the world. Just trying to save one company. The world can wait. They talked for an hour. Not about the meeting or strategy or what came next, just about small things. Victoria told him about growing up with Daniel, how he'd been the funny one, the one who could make anyone laugh. Ethan told her about Lily's recent obsession with becoming a paleontologist, and how she'd started carrying around a toy dinosaur she'd named Dr. Bones. That's adorable, Victoria said. She's convinced Dr. Bones needs to come to every meal. We have to set a place for him. Workshop eats. Does Dr. Bones have dietary restrictions? Only eats vegetables, apparently, which is convenient because Lily doesn't want them. Victoria laughed, and this time it sounded real. I miss that. Being around someone who sees the world that simply. Good guys and bad guys. Problems that can be solved with imagination. You should come over more often. Lily's always asking when Miss Victoria is coming back. Yeah? Yeah, she likes you. And honestly, so do I. There was a pause. Then Victoria said quietly, I like you too, Ethan. More than I expected to. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I'm still figuring that out. They hung up eventually, and Ethan managed to sleep for 2 hours before his alarm went off. He got Lily ready for school, made her breakfast, listened to her explain why Dr. Bones needed sunglasses today because dinosaurs probably liked being stylish too. The normalcy of it steadied him. Whatever happened at the board meeting, he still had this. Still had Lily and breakfast conversations and toy dinosaurs with fashion sense. That had to be enough. The board meeting started at 9. Ethan sat beside Victoria at the conference table, acutely aware that this could be the end of everything they'd built. Voss opened without pleasantries. Let's address the situation in operations.
4 resignations in 3 days. Multiple projects behind schedule. Clients expressing concerns. Ms. Hale, explain to us why this isn't a complete disaster. Victoria's voice was steady, because the problem wasn't the reforms. It was Gerald and the managers who enabled his approach. They were resisting change, not implementing it properly. Their departure removes the main obstacle to success. That's optimistic, Patricia said dryly. How do you plan to actually fix operations? We're promoting from within. Elena Rodriguez has been an operations manager for 6 years. She supported the reforms from the beginning. She knows the division, has the team's respect, and has already started implementing changes. And if she can't turn things around, Voss asked, then we'll reevaluate. But she deserves a chance. The alternative is admitting that Gerald was right, that we need to work people to death to succeed. I won't accept that conclusion without exhausting every other option first. One of the board members Ethan didn't know well leaned forward. The optics of this are terrible. 4 managers quitting looks like a mass exodus, like the ship is sinking. Or it looks like we're serious about reform, Ethan said. Everyone turned to him. Gerald and his allies resisted every change. They undermined policies, pressured employees to work excessive hours, and created a toxic environment. Their departure isn't a loss. It's accountability. And the employees who actually do the work are relieved they're gone. You've spoken to operations employees? Patricia asked. 12 of them over the past 2 days. They're exhausted and demoralized, but not because of the reforms. Because Gerald kept telling them the reforms would fail and they should prepare for things to go back to how they were. Now that he's gone, they finally believe we're serious. Voss looked skeptical. That's a convenient narrative. It's the truth. You want proof? Talk to them yourself. Don't just listen to executive-level complaints. Ask the people actually doing the work what they need. The room was silent. Then Patricia said, I'd like to do that. Interview a representative sample of operations staff. See what they're actually experiencing. Fine, Voss said. We'll conduct employee interviews. But in the meantime, Ms. Hale, you have 4 weeks to show improvement in operations. If the numbers don't move in the right direction, we're pulling the plug on this entire program. Are we clear? Crystal, Victoria said. After the board members left, Ethan and Victoria sat alone in the conference room. Victoria's hands were shaking slightly, the only sign that her calm facade had cost her something. 4 weeks, she said. We can do it. Can we? Gerald spent months sabotaging operations. Even with him gone, the damage is done. Projects are behind. Clients are worried. How do we fix that in 4 weeks? By working with Elena, by giving her the resources she needs, by showing the operations team that we meant what we said about supporting them. Victoria closed her eyes. I'm tired, Ethan. I've been fighting this fight for years across multiple companies. And every time, it's the same pattern. Initial success, then resistance, then a crisis, then backsliding. I don't know if I have another battle in me. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. She looked surprised but didn't pull away. You're not fighting alone this time, he said. That's different. That matters. She squeezed his hand once, then let go. Okay, let's go meet with Elena. Elena Rodriguez was 38, sharp-eyed, and visibly exhausted. She'd been managing operations teams for 6 years and had watched Gerald systematically undermine every attempt at reasonable work standards. When Victoria asked her to take over the division, her first response was, Can I fire people? Who? Victoria asked. 3 team leads who are still pushing Gerald's approach. They're toxic. They undermine anyone who tries to follow the new policies. As long as they're here, nothing changes. Fire them, Victoria said without hesitation. Elena blinked. Just like that? Just like that. Document the reasons, work with HR to make it clean, but yes, get rid of them. Then tell me what else you need. More people. Gerald kept the division understaffed to force overtime. If we're going to meet deadlines without killing everyone, we need at least 8 additional staff. You'll have them. What else? Time. The projects Gerald screwed up can't be fixed overnight. We need to renegotiate deadlines with clients. Some won't like it, but it's better than continuing to fail.
Victoria nodded. I'll handle client relationships. You focus on rebuilding the team.
And Elena? I'm trusting you. Don't make me regret it.
I won't, Elena said.
Then she smiled slightly.
Honestly, this is the first time in 6 years I felt like management actually gives a damn. That's worth fighting for.
After the meeting, Ethan walked Victoria back to her office. She looked wrung out, like she'd used up every reserve of energy just staying upright. Go home, Ethan said. It's 2 p.m., and you've been running on empty for weeks. Go home. Rest. The company won't collapse if you take an afternoon off. Are you taking an afternoon off? Yes. I'm picking Lily up early and taking her to the aquarium. She's been asking to go for weeks. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, Can I come with you? The question caught Ethan off guard. To the aquarium? Yeah, I know it's weird inviting myself to your family outing, but I really don't want to go home alone right now. I'll just sit there and spiral about all the ways this could fail. It's not weird. Lily would love it. Fair warning, though, she's going to talk about fish facts the entire time. I can handle fish facts. They picked up Lily from school together.
She was thrilled to see Victoria and immediately started explaining why they needed to see the jellyfish exhibit first, because jellyfish don't have brains. And that's wild, Miss Victoria.
At the aquarium, Lily led them through every exhibit with the confidence of a tiny tour guide. She pressed her face against the glass tanks, narrated the lives of various fish based on their expressions, and declared that the octopus was definitely plotting something. Victoria laughed more in 2 hours than Ethan had heard in months. She asked Lily questions and listened to the answers with complete attention. When Lily wanted to see the penguin feeding, Victoria hoisted her up on her shoulders so she could see over the crowd. Watching them together, Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. Not pain this time. Something else. Something warm and terrifying and hopeful. After the aquarium, they got ice cream. Lily got chocolate with rainbow sprinkles and proceeded to get it everywhere. Victoria helped clean her up with the patient competence of someone who'd maybe done this before, or who just knew how to be present with a kid. Miss Victoria, Lily said seriously. Ice cream smeared on her chin despite their best efforts. Are you and Daddy friends? Victoria glanced at Ethan, uncertain. He nodded slightly. Yes, Victoria said. We're friends.
Good. Daddy needs more friends. He doesn't have very many. Lily, Ethan said, mortified. It's true. You only ever talk to Grandma and people from work. That's not enough friends.
She's not wrong, Victoria said, trying not to smile. After they dropped Lily at Ethan's mother's house, she was having a sleepover with her cousin. Ethan and Victoria sat in his car in the driveway. Thank you, Victoria said,
for letting me crash your afternoon. I needed that more than I realized.
Anytime, seriously. She looked at him, and her expression was complicated. Can I ask you something personal? When did you stop hating yourself? For Daniel. Ethan thought about that. I'm not sure I have. But it's different now. Before, the guilt was this huge weight that crushed everything. Now it's still there, but it's next to other things. Purpose. Hope. Lily. You.
He paused. I think maybe healing isn't about the guilt going away. It's about building a life big enough that the guilt isn't the only thing in it.
Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I told Daniel to keep working the night he died. I've never told anyone that except you. For 5 years I've carried it alone. And I thought that was what I deserved, to carry it alone forever. You don't. I know, but knowing doesn't make it easier. She looked at him. Being around you and Lily helps, though. Reminds me that life is supposed to be more than just punishing yourself. It is more. You just have to let yourself see it. Mama shots. She leaned across the center console and hugged him. It was quick and awkward, but Ethan hugged her back. When she pulled away, her eyes were damp. Thank you, she said again. Then she got out of the car and walked to her own vehicle. Ethan sat there for a while after she left, trying to understand what was happening. Somewhere along the way, Victoria had stopped being the sister of the man he'd killed and started being someone he cared about deeply. Someone whose pain mattered to him. Someone he wanted to protect. It should have felt wrong, but it didn't. It felt like the only honest thing in his life. The next 4 weeks were the hardest since the pilot program started. Elena worked brutal hours trying to salvage operations, and Ethan helped wherever he could. They redistributed projects across teams, renegotiated deadlines with clients, and slowly, very slowly, started seeing progress. Patricia kept her word about interviewing employees. She spent a week talking to people across all divisions, from entry-level staff to senior managers. Ethan didn't know what people told her, but he hoped they were honest. Meanwhile, the rest of the company watched operations like everyone watches a car accident, waiting to see if it would crash or somehow pull through. Victoria was barely sleeping. Ethan could see it in the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands shook slightly when she held her coffee. He tried to get her to rest, but she was running on pure stubborn determination. "I'll rest when this is over," she told him. "That's what Daniel said." She flinched. "That's not fair." "It's true. You're doing to yourself what the old system did to him. You're working until you break." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're exhausted, and you're no good to anyone if you collapse." They were in her office, late evening, everyone else gone. Victoria stood at the window with her back to him. "I can't fail," she said quietly. "If this doesn't work, it proves every person who said reform was impossible, right? It means Daniel died for nothing. It means I wasted 5 years fighting for something that can't be won. It doesn't mean any of that. It means one company wasn't ready. There will be others. I don't want there to be others. I want this one to work. I want to win just once." Ethan walked over and stood beside her. Below, the city lights stretched out endlessly. All those buildings full of people working too hard, trying to prove something, slowly burning out. "You're already winning," he said. "Even if the board shuts this down tomorrow, you've changed things. People in this company know what's possible now. They've experienced what work can be like when you're not exhausted all the time. That doesn't go away just because the board gets scared." Victoria turned to look at him. "How are you so calm about this?" "I'm not. I'm terrified. But I've spent 5 years being paralyzed by fear. It didn't help anyone. So now I just try to show up and do the work and hope it's enough. And if it's not enough, then at least we tried. At least we stood up and said this system is wrong and we're going to fight it. That's more than most people do." She leaned against him, just for a moment, like she was too tired to hold herself up anymore. Ethan put his arm around her shoulders and they stood there together, watching the city lights and trying to believe tomorrow wouldn't destroy everything. The board meeting to review operations progress was scheduled for a Friday morning, 3 weeks and 6 days since they'd been given the ultimatum. Elena had prepared a presentation showing the improvements. Projects back on track. Employee satisfaction up significantly. 2 major clients expressing renewed confidence. But Ethan knew numbers could only tell part of the story. The board needed to believe this was sustainable, not just a temporary spike. He and Victoria arrived early. Elena was already there, setting up her laptop, looking nervous. "You've got this," Victoria told her. "Just tell the truth. Show them what you've built." Elena nodded, but her hands were shaking. The board members filed in, Voss, Patricia, the others. They took their seats with expressions that gave nothing away. Patricia spoke first. "I've completed the employee interviews. I spoke to 47 people across all divisions over the past 3 weeks. I'd like to share what I found before we hear from operations." Ethan's stomach dropped. This could go either way. Patricia pulled up a document on the screen. "The employees I spoke to were almost unanimously positive about the reforms. They reported feeling more rested, more engaged, and more valued. Several mentioned that, for the first time in years, they felt like the company cared whether they lived or died." That's a direct quote from 3 different people. She clicked to the next slide. In operations specifically, the story was more complicated. Employees were demoralized by Gerald's resistance and the constant message that reform would fail. However, since Elena took over, morale has improved dramatically. People feel heard, they trust leadership again, and most importantly, they believe the changes will stick. Voss leaned forward. "Did anyone express concerns?" A few, mostly about whether the board would maintain commitment if profits dipped. "There's a fear that this is temporary, that at the first sign of financial trouble, we'll backslide." Patricia paused. "I told them I couldn't promise that wouldn't happen, but I also told them I'd advocate for making these changes permanent." The room went silent. Then Patricia looked at Victoria. I was skeptical at first. I thought this was idealistic nonsense that would hurt our competitive edge. But the data doesn't lie. We're retaining talent. Quality is up. And the divisions that have fully embraced reform are outperforming their previous benchmarks. This works. We should make it permanent. Ethan saw Victoria's shoulders relax slightly. One vote in their favor. They needed more. Elena presented next. She walked through operations improvements with clear, confident data. Projects completed, deadlines met, clients satisfied. The division had gone from crisis to functional in under a month. How did you do it? Voss asked. I actually enforced the policies, Elena said bluntly. I removed toxic managers. I hired additional staff. I redistributed work so no one was drowning. And I told the team I trusted them to do good work without killing themselves. That's it. That's the whole strategy. And you believe this is sustainable? Absolutely. The old approach was never sustainable. We were just good at hiding the damage until people quit or broke down. Now the damage is visible, which means we can actually address it. After Elena finished, the board deliberated. 15 minutes that felt like hours. Ethan sat beside Victoria, both of them silent, waiting. Finally, Voss spoke. We're approving permanent implementation, company-wide, all divisions, effective immediately. Victoria's breath caught. Ethan felt lightheaded. However, Voss continued, we'll be monitoring closely. If performance drops, if we see negative trends, we reserve the right to adjust. This isn't a blank check, Ms. Hale. It's continued trust that you'll deliver results. Understood, Victoria said. Her voice was steady, but Ethan saw her hands gripping the edge of the table. After the board members left, Ethan and Victoria sat in the empty conference room. Elena had already gone to tell her team the news. They were alone. We did it, Victoria said. She sounded stunned. You did it. We did it, she repeated firmly. This was never just me. Ethan didn't argue. He was too busy trying to process what had just happened. They'd won. Actually won. The reforms were permanent. The company was changing. Daniel's death had led to something meaningful after all. Victoria stood up suddenly and walked to the window. Her shoulders were shaking. Ethan realized she was crying. He went to her, and she turned and buried her face against his shoulder. He held her while she sobbed. Huge, wrenching sobs that sounded like 5 years of grief finally breaking loose. I thought we'd fail, she said between gasps. I thought they'd fire me and reverse everything and it would all be for nothing. But they didn't. You won. We won, she corrected, pulling back to look at him. Her eyes were red and her face was blotchy, but she was smiling. We actually won. Then, before Ethan could process what was happening, she kissed him. It was brief and desperate and tasted like salt from her tears. When she pulled back, she looked shocked at herself. I'm sorry, she said. I shouldn't have. Ethan kissed her back. Longer this time, slower. His hands cupped her face and she leaned into him like she'd been wanting to do this for a long time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria said, This is complicated. Very. We work together. There's the history with Daniel. People will judge. She's... Probably. We should probably talk about this. Figure out what it means. We should, Ethan agreed. Then he kissed her again. They ended up at Victoria's apartment. Neither of them had planned it, but after leaving the office, Victoria asked if Ethan wanted to get dinner, and he said yes, and somehow they ended up at her place instead of a restaurant. The apartment was stark and impersonal, like Victoria had never bothered making it a home. Expensive furniture that looked unused, no photos, no clutter, just empty space. I'm never here, she said, seeing Ethan look around. I basically just sleep here. You should fix that. Yeah, I should. They ordered takeout and ate sitting on her couch. The food was good, but neither of them paid much attention to it. They were too busy talking. About the meeting, about Elena, about what permanent implementation actually meant. We'll need to document everything, Victoria said. Create training programs. Make sure new managers understand the policies. This is just the beginning. Can we not talk about work right now? Ethan asked. She looked surprised. What should we talk about? I don't know. Anything else? What do you do when you're not working? Victoria thought about that. I don't know. Work is what I do.
That's depressing. I know. I used to have hobbies. I used to read, go hiking. Daniel and I used to go to concerts together. Baman di pasamitsam. She smiled sadly. After he died, I just stopped. It felt wrong to enjoy things when he couldn't. That's not what he would have wanted. I know, but guilt doesn't care about logic. They were sitting close together on the couch. Ethan took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. We're a mess, aren't we? Two people who forgot how to be human. Yeah, but maybe we can remember together. She kissed him again, and this time it didn't feel desperate or complicated. It just felt right, like two broken pieces that somehow fit together. They didn't sleep together that night. Both were too aware of how fragile this thing between them was. But they stayed up talking until 3 a.m., curled up on the couch, sharing pieces of themselves they'd kept hidden. Victoria told him about her parents, who'd never recovered from Daniel's death, how she'd tried to be strong for them and ended up distant instead, how she hadn't been home for a holiday in 2 years because being there just reminded everyone of who was missing. Ethan told her about his ex-wife, who'd been a good person but wrong for him, how he'd married her because it seemed like what he was supposed to do, not because he actually loved her, how the divorce had been sad but also a relief. Do you think we're doing this for the right reasons? Victoria asked. Or are we just two lonely people who've been through trauma together? Does it matter? Either way, I like being around you. Either way, you make me feel less alone. That's not the most romantic declaration. It's honest, though. She smiled. Yeah, it is. Ethan left around 4 a.m., exhausted but lighter than he'd felt in years. He drove home through empty streets, thinking about Victoria and the kiss and what came next. Part of him was terrified. This could blow up in their faces, could make everything complicated, could end badly and ruin the working relationship they'd built. But another part, the part that had learned to take risks again, to believe in something beyond guilt, thought maybe it was worth it. Maybe Victoria was worth it. At home, he collapsed into bed and slept for 4 hours before his alarm went off. Lily was at his mother's for the weekend, so he had the apartment to himself. He made coffee, took a shower, and tried to figure out what he was supposed to do now. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. I keep replaying last night in my head, trying to figure out if I made a huge mistake. Ethan typed back, "Did you?" Her response came quickly. I don't think so, but I'm scared. Me too. Want to talk about it? Not over text. Can you come over? Ethan was in his car 5 minutes later. Victoria answered the door in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked younger like this, more vulnerable, less like the unshakable CEO who'd faced down hostile board members, and more like someone who'd spent the night second-guessing everything. Hey, she said. Hey. They stood there for a moment, neither quite sure what to do. Then Victoria stepped aside. Come in. I made coffee. Was... In the kitchen, she poured 2 mugs and handed him one. Her hands were steady, but Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders. So, she said, last night. Last night, Ethan agreed. I kissed you. Multiple times. I kissed you back. Also multiple times. Victoria leaned against the counter. I need to know what you want from this, because I can't do casual. I don't have the emotional bandwidth for something that doesn't mean anything. It means something, Ethan said. I don't know exactly what yet, but it's not nothing. That's not very specific. I know, but I've spent 5 years being paralyzed by trying to figure everything out before taking any action. I'm done with that. I like you. I like being around you. I want to see where this goes. That's all I've got right now. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I like you too, more than I should, more than is probably smart given we work together, and there's the whole Daniel situation. But I'm scared. What if this doesn't work? What if we try and it falls apart and we can't work together anymore? We've built something important at the company. I don't want to risk that. Ethan set down his coffee and walked over to her. We're going to be scared of everything if we think like that. Scared to try, scared to fail, scared to be happy because happiness might not last. He took her hands. I've lived that way for 5 years. It doesn't protect you from pain. It just guarantees you never feel anything else.
When did you get wise? About 15 minutes ago. I'm faking it. She laughed, and some of the tension left her face. Okay, let's try. But we need rules. We keep work and personal life separate. We're honest with each other. And if this starts affecting our jobs, we reevaluate. Agreed. And we take it slow. I haven't dated anyone since before Daniel died. I don't know how to do this anymore. Well, I've been divorced for 2 years, and my last relationship was a disaster. We'll figure it out together. Victoria looked at him, and her expression softened. You're a good person, Ethan Cole. Better than you think you are. I'm working on believing that. She kissed him then, soft and deliberate. And Ethan felt something in his chest unfold. This wasn't about grief or guilt or shared trauma. This was about two people who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided to build something new. They spent the rest of the day together, mostly just existing in the same space. Victoria showed him her apartment, the empty second bedroom she used for storage, the balcony she never sat on, the kitchen where she rarely cooked. They ordered lunch and ate it on the couch while watching old movies neither of them paid attention to. It was normal and easy and nothing like what Ethan had expected. He'd thought being with Victoria would be complicated and heavy. Instead, it felt like breathing. Around 5, his phone rang. His mother. Lily wants to come home early, she said. She's missing you. Should I bring her over? Ethan looked at Victoria, who nodded. Yeah, Mom. Thanks. After he hung up, Victoria asked, Should I leave? Give you two some space? Do you want to leave? Not really. Then stay. Lily likes you, and I want her to be part of this, whatever this is. Victoria looked nervous. That's a big step, meeting your kid as someone you're dating versus someone you work with. I know, but I'm not interested in having a relationship that exists in a separate box from my daughter. She's the most important thing in my life. Anyone I'm with needs to be okay with that. I'm okay with that. I'm just scared of messing it up. You won't. You're already great with her. When Lily arrived 20 minutes later, she burst through the door with her usual energy, saw Victoria on the couch, and immediately ran over. Miss Victoria, are you staying for dinner? Can we make pizza again? Can Dr. Bones meet your dinosaur if you have one? Victoria laughed. I don't have a dinosaur, but I'd love to meet Dr. Bones properly. They made spaghetti instead of pizza, Lily's second choice, and Lily talked nonstop about her sleepover at her cousin's house. Something about building a fort and watching movies and eating too much candy. After dinner, while Lily was in her room playing, Victoria helped Ethan clean the kitchen. This is nice, Victoria said quietly. Being part of something normal. Family dinner, dishes, a kid laughing in the other room. You could have this if you wanted. What? Could I? I don't know how to be normal. I've spent 5 years being the CEO who fixes broken companies. That's my identity. I don't know who I am outside of work. Then maybe it's time to figure it out. She looked at him and her eyes were bright. Maybe. Over the next 3 months, they figured it out together. They kept their relationship quiet at work. Not hiding exactly, but not advertising it either. They needed to prove to themselves it was real before dealing with everyone else's opinions. At the company, the reforms continued to spread. Elena's operations division became a model for other departments. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high. Turnover dropped to nearly nothing. Even the skeptical managers started admitting the new approach worked. The industry noticed. 3 competitors reached out to Victoria, asking how she'd managed the transformation. One offered her a consulting contract. Another tried to recruit her as CEO. She turned them all down. I'm not leaving, she told Ethan one evening at her apartment. This company has Daniel's fingerprints all over it. Leaving would feel like abandoning him. Oh, he wouldn't want you to stay somewhere just because of him. I know, but I want to stay. For the first time in 5 years, I feel like I'm building something instead of just fixing broken things. That's because of you, because of what we created here. Ethan understood. He felt the same way. The company had gone from a place of guilt and avoidance to somewhere he actually wanted to be. That transformation meant something. In January, 11 months after Victoria first became CEO, the company held its annual gala. It was a fancy event at a downtown hotel, black tie, open bar, awards for outstanding employees. Ethan hadn't planned to go. He hated these things. But Victoria asked him to attend as her date, and he couldn't say no. Lily stayed with his mother for the night. Ethan put on the suit he'd bought for his wedding 7 years ago and hoped it still fit. It did, barely. When he picked up Victoria, she was wearing a dark blue dress that made her look like someone from a movie. She'd left her hair down for once, falling in soft waves past her shoulders. "You look beautiful," Ethan said.
"You look terrified." Also accurate.
At the gala, they mingled with employees and executives. People who knew about their relationships smiled knowingly. People who didn't ask intrusive questions about why Victoria was spending so much time talking to a mid-level project manager. Halfway through the evening, Richard Voss approached them. The former CEO looked older than when he'd left, but less stressed. "Ms. Hale," he said, "congratulations on the company's success this year. The board is quite pleased." "Thank you." Voss turned to Ethan. "And Mr. Cole, I understand you've been instrumental in the workplace reforms. That takes courage. Speaking up when others stay silent." Ethan didn't know what to say to that.
"I just told the truth. Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do."
After Voss walked away, Victoria squeezed Ethan's hand. "He's right, you know. You did something brave. You stood up in front of people who could fire you and told them they were wrong. That changed everything." "You were the one who—" "We did it together," Victoria interrupted. "Stop trying to give me all the credit. We're a team." The award ceremony started at 8. Various employees received recognition for outstanding work. Elena got an award for leadership. Sarah from marketing got one for innovation. Then Voss returned to the stage. "Our final award tonight is new. It's for someone who exemplifies our company's values of putting people first, someone who fought for reform when it wasn't popular, someone who turned personal tragedy into meaningful change." Ethan's stomach dropped. He knew what was coming. This year's Workplace Excellence Award goes to Ethan Cole. The room erupted in applause. Ethan sat frozen. Victoria nudged him gently. "Go. You earned this. Ishi intimas nkias." He walked to the stage on autopilot, accepted the plaque from Voss, looked out at the crowd of people clapping for him. He should say something, thank people, make a gracious speech. Instead he said, "This award should have Daniel Hale's name on it." The applause stopped. The room went silent. Ethan continued, 5 years ago, Daniel Hale died because this company valued profit over people. He worked himself to death because we told him that was what success looked like. I approved the hours that killed him. I'm partially responsible for his death. That's not something you give awards for." He could see Victoria in the crowd, her hand over her mouth. He could see Victoria in, "But Daniel's death taught me something. It taught me that we can't keep sacrificing people for productivity. We can't keep pretending that exhaustion is dedication. We can't keep building success on broken bodies and destroyed lives." He looked at the plaque in his hands. "This award represents changes that happened because Daniel died, because his sister refused to let that death be meaningless, because employees in this room decided they deserved better." Okay, see. He set the plaque down on the podium. "I don't deserve recognition for helping fix a system I helped break. But I'll accept this award on behalf of everyone who suffered under the old culture, everyone who quit because they couldn't take it anymore, everyone who stayed and burned out, everyone who's still fighting to prove that treating people with dignity isn't a radical idea." Ethan picked up the plaque again. "To Daniel Hale and every employee this company failed before we finally got it right." The applause that followed was different, slower, more thoughtful. Several people were crying. When Ethan left the stage, Victoria was waiting. She didn't say anything, just pulled him into a tight hug. "That was perfect," she whispered. "He would have been so proud." After the gala ended, they drove to a park near Victoria's apartment and sat on a bench overlooking the water. It was late February, cold enough that they could see their breath, but neither wanted to go inside yet. "Do you think we did enough?" Victoria asked. "Changed enough? Made Daniel's death mean something?" "I think we did what we could. The rest is up to the people who come after us." That's not very satisfying. "The show so what some see it." "No, but it's honest." Ethan took her hand. "We can't fix everything. We can't bring Daniel back. but we created something that makes other people's lives better. That has to count for something.
Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. I spent 5 years angry at the world, at the company, at you, at myself. I don't feel angry anymore. Is that wrong? Should I still be angry? I think anger was useful for a while. It pushed you to fight. But maybe now you're allowed to just miss him, to remember him without the rage. I do miss him, every day.
But it doesn't hurt the same way anymore. They sat in silence for a while, watching the moonlight on the water. Then Victoria said, I think I'm falling in love with you. Ethan's heart stuttered. Yeah? Yeah, it scares me, but it's true. I'm falling in love with you too. Have been for a while now, Ian. She turned to look at him. What do we do with that? We see where it goes. We keep building this thing between us. We let ourselves be happy, even though it's terrifying.
Okay, Victoria said.
Let's do that. They kissed there on the bench, cold and happy, and finally starting to believe they deserved this. 4 months later, in June, Victoria and Ethan drove to the cemetery where Daniel was buried. They'd talked about it for weeks, whether it was time, whether it would hurt too much, whether they were ready. Finally, they decided they'd never be fully ready. They just had to go. The cemetery was peaceful, full of old trees and well-maintained grass. Daniel's headstone was simple, his name, his dates, and the words beloved son and brother. Victoria stood in front of the grave with flowers in her hands. Ethan stood beside her.
Hi, Daniel, Victoria said quietly. It's been a while. I'm sorry I haven't visited more. It was too hard for a long time. She knelt down and placed the flowers on the grave. I want you to know that I did what I promised. I changed things. The company is different now. People aren't working themselves to death anymore. They have time to rest, time to live. You would like it. Her voice broke slightly. Ethan put his hand on her shoulder. I met someone, Victoria continued. Ethan, you never knew him, but he knew you. He was your manager. He's been carrying guilt about your death for 5 years, just like me. We've been helping each other figure out how to live with it, how to forgive ourselves. She paused. I think you'd like him. He's kind. He's patient. He makes me laugh. He reminds me that life is supposed to be more than just work. She stood up and Ethan stepped forward. He'd never been to Daniel's grave before, never allowed himself the closure of saying goodbye. I'm sorry, Ethan said. His voice was rough. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I'm sorry I approved those hours. I'm sorry you trusted me and I failed you. He took a shaky breath. But I want you to know that your death changed things. It changed me. It changed your sister. It changed a whole company. That doesn't make it okay. Nothing makes it okay. But maybe it means something. Victoria took his hand. They stood there together, two people who'd been broken by the same loss and somehow found each other in the aftermath. We're going to be okay, Victoria said, speaking to Daniel, but also to Ethan and herself. We're going to build good lives. We're going to honor you by refusing to make the same mistakes. And we're going to remember you not just as someone who died, but as someone who lived. Someone who was funny and smart and kind. Someone who deserved better than what this world gave him. They stayed for a while longer, talking to Daniel about small things. The company. Lily. The future they were building. Finally, as the sun started setting, they walked back to the car. Do you feel different? Ethan asked. A little. Like I can finally breathe properly. Victoria looked back at the grave. I'll never stop missing him, but I think I'm ready to stop punishing myself. Me too, and they drove to Ethan's apartment. Lily was with his mother for the weekend, so they had the place to themselves. They made dinner together. Victoria was getting better at cooking, though she still burned things with impressive regularity, and ate on the couch while watching a documentary about penguins that Lily had insisted they watch. She really loves penguins, Victoria observed. This week. Last week it was octopuses, before that sharks. She's going to be a marine biologist, or a paleontologist, or an astronaut. She changes her mind daily. Victoria smiled. That must be nice, having infinite possibilities, not being locked into one path. You're not locked into one path. You can do anything. Can I? I've spent my entire adult life being the CEO who fixes broken companies. That's who I am. That's what you do. It's not who you are. Ethan paused. Who do you want to be? Victoria thought about that. I want to be someone who has a life outside work, someone who remembers how to have fun, someone who's present for the people she loves instead of always thinking about the next problem to solve. That sounds good. It sounds terrifying, but good. Well, they talked late into the night about futures and possibilities, about what came next for the company, for their relationship, for themselves as individuals. There were no easy answers, but for the first time, they weren't looking for easy answers, just honest ones. A year and a half after Victoria first became CEO, the company held a town hall to celebrate 2 full years of the new workplace policies. The auditorium was packed with employees, all of them there voluntarily. That alone was remarkable. In the old days, town halls had been mandatory and miserable. Victoria stood at the podium looking calm and confident. Ethan sat in the front row next to Elena and Sarah, watching her command the room. 2 years ago, Victoria said, this company had a choice. We could continue operating the way we always had, pushing people past their limits, treating burnout as normal, pretending that productivity mattered more than human lives. Or we could admit that system was broken and build something better. She clicked to a slide showing statistics. These numbers tell a story. Turnover down 70%, employee satisfaction at record highs, quality of work improved across all metrics. We're more profitable now than we were under the old system because people who are rested and valued do better work. Applause rippled through the auditorium. But numbers don't capture everything, Victoria continued. They don't capture the engineer who told me she can finally sleep through the night without work anxiety. They don't capture the manager who said he gets to have dinner with his kids now. They don't capture the young employee who was about to quit because she couldn't handle the pace, who decided to stay because we proved we care whether she burns out. Victoria's voice softened. 2 years ago, my brother Daniel died because this company, worked him until he couldn't stay awake. He was 25 years old, he had a whole life ahead of him, and we took that away by treating him like a machine instead of a person. The room was completely silent. I came here angry, Victoria said, determined to make sure no one else suffered the way Daniel did. What I didn't expect was finding people who felt the same way, who were tired of the old system, who wanted change badly enough to fight for it even when it was hard. She looked at Ethan. Some of those people became friends. Some became family. And together, we built something I'm genuinely proud of. She paused. This isn't the end. Culture change is ongoing work. We'll make mistakes. We'll face new challenges, but I believe we've proven something important. You don't have to destroy people to be successful. You can treat employees with dignity and still run a profitable company. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. The applause was thunderous. People stood. Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion he couldn't quite name. After the town hall, employees swarmed Victoria with questions and thanks. Ethan hung back, letting her have her moment. Elena appeared beside him. You two make a good team, she said. Ethan glanced at her. That obvious? To anyone paying attention, she looks at you like you're the reason she smiles. Elena paused. For what it's worth, I think Daniel would approve. Of the changes. Of you. All of it. I hope so. I know so. I've read about him. Talked to people who knew him. He wanted exactly what you two built here. He just didn't live long enough to see it. After the crowd cleared, Ethan found Victoria in her office. She was standing at the window looking out at the city like she had so many times before. But this time, she didn't look tense or worried. She just looked peaceful. Hey, Ethan said from the doorway. She turned and smiled. Hey, that went well. It went perfectly. You were perfect. I was nervous. Didn't show. She walked over and wrapped her arms around him. Thank you for everything. For believing in this when I was too tired to keep fighting. For being my partner. For loving me, even though I'm a workaholic with too much baggage. You're not baggage, you're just human, and I love you exactly as you are. Victoria pulled back to look at him. I want to ask you something, and you can say no. Okay, move in with me, you and Lily. I know it's a big step, and I know we've only been together for a year, but I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to have breakfast with Lily and hear about her dragon drawings.
I want to build a life with you, a real life, not just stolen moments between work.
Ethan felt his heart expand. You want Lily to live with you? I want both of you. I know I'm not her mother. I'm not trying to replace anyone, but I love her, and I love you, and I want us to be a family, if that's something you want too. Ethan thought about his small apartment, about the life he'd built there as a survival mechanism. Then he thought about Victoria's empty apartment becoming a home, about Lily having another person who loved her unconditionally, about waking up every day next to someone who understood him completely. Yes, he said. We want that too. Victoria's smile was radiant. Yeah? Yeah, but you have to let Lily decorate. Fair warning, there will be dinosaurs everywhere. I can live with dinosaurs.
They moved in together 2 months later. Lily was thrilled with the new apartment, especially the second bedroom that became hers. She covered the walls with drawings and insisted on giving Victoria a tour of every corner, explaining where her toys belonged and why the window was perfect for watching birds. Victoria listened with complete attention, asking questions about Lily's stuffed animals and admiring the dragon castle they'd rebuilt in the living room. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan and Victoria sat on the balcony Victoria had never used before. The city lights stretched out below them, but for once, they weren't thinking about work or problems or what came next. This is nice, Victoria said, having a home that feels like a home. You've done good work here, making it comfortable. Lily did most of it. She has opinions about throw pillows. Ethan laughed. She has opinions about everything. Ikats. They sat in comfortable silence. Then Victoria said, I never thought I'd have this. A partner, a family, a life outside work. After Daniel died, I assumed I'd just be alone forever, that I didn't deserve happiness. But you showed me that guilt doesn't have to be forever, that we can honor the people we lost by building lives they'd be proud of, that redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about making sure the past creates something meaningful for the future. Ethan took her hand. I spent 5 years believing I deserved nothing but punishment, that loving someone or being happy would somehow betray Daniel, but you taught me that he wouldn't want that. He'd want us to live, to fight for better things, to find joy even after tragedy. We're both still learning. Yeah, but we're learning together. That makes it easier. Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. I love you, Ethan Cole. I love you too, and they sat there until late, talking about the future they were building, about Lily starting 3rd grade, about Victoria finally taking a vacation, about the possibility of expanding the workplace reforms to other companies through consulting work. The conversation was easy and hopeful, and nothing like what either of them had imagined a year ago. But that was the thing about healing. It didn't happen the way you expected. It happened in small moments, in quiet conversations, in choosing to build something new instead of staying trapped in what was broken. 2 years after moving in together, on a warm Saturday in spring, Victoria and Ethan got married. It was a small ceremony in a park, just close friends and family. Lily was the flower girl and took the job very seriously, scattering petals with the precision of a surgeon. Ethan's mother cried through the entire ceremony. Victoria's parents came, the first time she'd seen them in 3 years. They looked older and sadder, but they smiled when Victoria said her vows. I promise to build a life with you that honors both the joy and the grief we've experienced, Victoria said, her voice steady. I promise to remember that we're human, not perfect. I promise to love you on the hard days and the easy days. And I promise to never forget that the worst tragedy of our lives led us to each other. And that's a gift I'll treasure forever. Ethan's vows were simpler. I promise to show up, to be present, to love you and Lily with everything I have. And I promise that we'll keep fighting for the things that matter, not because it's easy, but because it's right. After the ceremony, during the reception in Victoria's parents' backyard, Ethan found himself standing next to Victoria's father. The older man looked at him with Daniel's eyes. Thank you, he said quietly, for taking care of her, for helping her find peace. She helped me find it too. Daniel would have liked you. He had good instincts about people. Ethan's throat tightened. I wish I'd known him better. Wish I'd made different choices. We all do. But what you and Victoria built from his death, that matters. That means he didn't die for nothing. Victoria's father put a hand on Ethan's shoulder.
Victoria's father put a hand. You gave my daughter her life back. That's more than I could have hoped for. Later, when the party was winding down and Lily was asleep on a couch inside, Ethan and Victoria stood in the backyard looking at the stars. We did it, Victoria said. We actually built a life. A good life. A great life. She turned to look at him. You know what I realized today? I'm happy. Actually, genuinely happy. Not just content or okay, happy. I didn't think that was possible after Daniel died. He'd want you to be happy. I know. And I think I finally believe that. She paused. I'll always miss him. Always wish things had been different, but I'm not drowning in guilt anymore. I'm just living. Finally living. Ethan pulled her close. That's all we can do. Live the best lives we can. Fight for the things that matter. Love the people we're lucky enough to find, and hope that's enough. It's enough, Victoria said. It's more than enough. They stood there together, two people who'd found each other in grief and built something beautiful from the wreckage. The worst thing that ever happened to them had led them here. To this backyard, this marriage, this life that neither had imagined possible. It didn't erase the pain. It didn't bring Daniel back. But it proved something important. That tragedy doesn't have to be the end of the story. That guilt can transform into purpose. That two broken people can help each other heal. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the worst things in life lead us exactly where we need to be. Years later, when Lily was 15 and asking her parents about how they met, Ethan would tell her the truth. That he'd made a mistake that cost someone their life. That her stepmother was that person's sister. That they'd found each other through shared grief and built something meaningful from it. That's really sad, Lily would say. It is, Ethan would agree. But it's also hopeful, because it means that even when we make terrible mistakes, we can still find ways to do better. To be better. To make sure those mistakes lead to something good. Did you forgive yourself? Lily would ask. For what happened? Ethan would think about that. I don't know if forgiveness is the right word. I learned to live with what I did. To accept that I can't change the past, but I can change the future. And I learned that redemption isn't about erasing your mistakes. It's about making sure they create something meaningful. That's kind of beautiful, Lily would say. In a sad way. Yeah, Ethan would agree. It is. I always must get. Because that's what he'd learned through all of this. Life isn't about being perfect. It's about being human. About making mistakes and learning from them. About carrying grief without letting it destroy you. About finding love in unexpected places. About building something good from something terrible. The worst tragedy of his life hadn't destroyed him forever. It had led him toward forgiveness, purpose, love, and a future he'd once believed he could never deserve. And in the end, that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.